secretly participated in same-gender sexuality, and they quote various passages from the New Testament to demonstrate that. So he united male and female in his own person through the practice of same-gender sacred sexuality. Shabtai Tzvi even more so, because there is recorded by Sholem that Shabtai Tzvi was having anal intercourse with an Arab boy in the presence of many rabbis. And he said to them, this is a tikkun of God. This is a healing of God. This is a reunification of male and female in God.
Shalom everyone. This is a very special lesson that will be going over the Frankist and Sabbatean Frankist cosmological understanding in Kabbalah, revealing the secrets behind their theological understandings and reasonings behind the things that they do. Now, to begin with, there is an aspect of Frank, to quote directly from the words of Yaakov Frank, discussing the following. He writes, "You will suffer so until you come to Esav. At that time the Da'as will be revealed to you, and then you will surely see the scene." Now, what does he mean, you will suffer until you come to Esav? There is a cosmological understanding amongst the Frankist theological Kabbalah in which they believe in the passing of the Simbachin River. The Simbachin River, they believed, is where the 10 tribes are in exile, specifically in Edom. Edom is the land in which Esav corresponds to. Their understanding of Esav here is that it relates specifically to Christianity. Now, regarding this, they called themselves Red Jews, being that they are rooted in the word Edom, and essentially meaning red. This, arguably, in other places is, for example, Rothschild, which again is an allusion to red shield, so on and so forth. And there are those who say that Mayor Amschel Rothschild, for example, was one of the founding members of the Bavarian Order of the Illuminati, alongside Yaakov Frank, Adam Weishaupt, and others. Now, to return back into the discussion at hand, this crossing into the Simbachin River is because they believed that Frank's job was in order to bring about the aspects of the Matir Asurim, the perversion, the permitting of the forbidden into Christianity itself. Shabtai Zevi, who declared himself the Messiah in the year 1666, was forced into conversion into Islam, in which later writers, such as Nathan of Gaza, would bring about theological reasoning for this, citing a Zoharic passage that stated that Mashiach ben Yosef would rise up on one side and go to the other side. An example, he would rise up on the right and go to the left, or the left and go to the right. In our case here, they believe that Messiah ben David rose up on the right and went into the left, and Messiah ben Yosef rose up on the left and went into the right. Believing this to be Shabtai Zevi, they believe that he was raised up from the left and went into the right. An example, Ishmael, that is to say Islam, where he brought these teachings there and found favor amongst the Sufi mystics, and which would later create a Sabbatean thread of transmission called the Dunmeh. Now, Yaakov Frank would come around in the 1700s and proclaim himself to be a reincarnation of Shabtai Zevi, a failed Mashiach within Jewish history. And he took up this exact same ideology and believed that he needed to go from the right to the left, meaning that he would enter into Edom. And so his entire consensus was into entering Edom. And he believed this in the secret of what was called the Red Jews. These Red Jews were actually crypto-Jews. There were Gerim, meaning strangers, and they would enter into Christianity or do conversions over into Catholicism and Christianity, but it was not for the purpose of actually observing Christianity. It was rather that they were to promote the ideas of this perverted form of Kabbalah. The Talmud teaches us that the Mashiach comes in one of two ways, either when the world is entirely righteous or the world is entirely wicked. Because they said not everyone can be righteous, they famously stated, then let us all be wicked. And so they began to taint and corrupt everything. and they began to stand against anything that was seeking for the process of tikkun or correction, because they believed that this would withhold the coming of the Messiah. Therefore, they needed to target specifically the pillars of faith. Obviously, they came out of Judaism and corrupted it there, but they were excommunicated. They then needed to bring this understanding into Islam, in which they would destabilize it, and then bring it over into Christianity or Catholicism, and then later into Protestantism, where they would begin the process of destabilizing it there. Their understanding of Jesus is not the understanding that we have. That is to say, the average person has an understanding of Jesus as it relates to the Catholic or Christian theological system. However, the understanding that Jakob Frank possessed of Jesus is that he made a deal with the god of death to lead the world astray. And so we find over here, continuing in the words of Jakob Frank, the following passages and statements. He says in regards to this, when Jesus came to the first, he sent him to the second, and he too sent him on. But when he came to the third one, I took him by the hand, and he asked him, where are you going? Jesus answered, I will go forth to the fourth, who is the God of gods. That God of death said to him, there is no God higher than me, for I am the Father of all gods. And he showed him great fear in order to frighten him. Jesus saw that the good God is not with him, and was really frightened. But the God of death had no power at all to take him. He then said to himself, I will have to bribe him so that he will stay with me. Then he says to Jesus, listen, my son, stay with me, and you will be seated to my right, and you will be the Son of God, and you will have the name of God over the world, just as it stands in the prayers. He sits to the right of the God of the all-powerful. And so he says, at that time, Jesus had to allow that, for he was afraid of him because he went by himself, and the living God was not with him. After that, he said to the God of death in these words, let it be as you demand. After the God of death said to him, sign that for me. Then he signed his name in blood from his finger. Then the God of death said, Jesus, my son, you must sacrifice your blood and your body for me. And he said, how can I give my body to you when it is known that I will bring eternal life into this world? The God of death answered him, it can't be that here in this world there will be eternal life. And Jesus said to him, but surely I said that this is my teaching, that I came to this world so that I would bring eternal life here into this world. So the God of death says to him, say your teaching is thus, that there will be eternal life in another world, but not in this world here. And so therefore it stands in the prayers, and after death life eternal. So therefore that he went without the living God and stayed at the place of those three. He gave more power to death over this world, just like Moshe himself, when those Israelites, when they are dying, and they call out in spite of dying, for they are God-fearing and don't know where they are going after death, whether it be to paradise, etc. So the understanding that he has regarding this aspect of Jesus is that there are different gods. He believed that there were three gods. So regarding this, he believes that Jesus made a deal with the God of death in order to bring death to the world and say eternal life isn't going to occur here, but rather it's going to occur in another world. And he believed that he was to bring them to Esav to reveal Da'as. That Da'as, or knowledge, refers to Gnosis. Later on in this particular expose, it will be revealed the actual cosmological understanding and theological reasoning to what that Gnosis is. It has to deal with Y.I.R.A.H, the demiurge, and his place within the fullness of the pleroma. In that pleroma, they believe that all of the Partsufim, or all of the divine beings, were there in a conjugal orgy of sorts, and that he would be exiled from that place, so on and so forth. The likeness of which he believed that the rules were placed in order to prevent that from occurring, and therefore they believed that they need to trespass or break the klipot, which were the restrictions from making this world like the orgy-filled world of the pleroma in this world. And so you will find later, especially during a conversation with a self-proclaimed Frankist regarding the theological reasonings to this, what this means in regarding to passing the Simbachan River. They believe that these 10 tribes are exiled there, and that the entire purpose of them is to undermine actual Judaism, of which they themselves will profess are not actually Jews, and they will go so far as to say that the actual Jews are Esav, while they themselves, although proclaiming to be red Jews and proclaiming to be Edom, in fact are not Jewish at all. These teachings, which are rooted into the Frankist lineage and has to deal with the messianic cosmology behind Shabtai Zevi, so on and so forth, is designed in order to undermine and bring somebody into these terribly corrupt, perverse teachings, which will be exposed in this series. Now, in order for us to have a true grasp and understanding into the nature of this type of teaching, we have to understand a couple of things. Whenever things are associated with Esav, whenever things are associated with Edom, whenever things are associated with the red Jews, the chances of this lineage is going to be either Sabbatean or Frankist. And when coming into the conversation of a person who comes to understand the idea of the red Jew, the normal Jew will not understand any of this. They'll bring out long lists of cosmological, or in this case, even historical references behind murky chains of lineage, so on and so forth, to justify the traditions that they've received, which ultimately originated from Nathan of Gaza, who received it, obviously, from students of the Arizal, for example, Ibn Tabul and others. One of the lineages, of course, that they will trace to is Israel Sarug, so on and so forth, which would bring it into Europe under Rav Naftali, and then they would use that as a basis for their theological reasonings and debates. Now, to preface this, we're going to be going into one of the shocking sephers called This Day I Came to the Well, which was compiled by Yonatan Eibeshutz, who was the Dayan of Prague. And he will be brought up on Sabbatean charges and ultimately be tried as a heretic, so on and so forth, although he would later be alleviated of these charges. But nonetheless, the cosmological reasonings and understandings found inside of this sefer were said to be the theological reasoning and basis for many of the bizarre concepts and ideas that will be discussed about later inside of this text. So with that being said, let us enter into the words of the Dayan of Prague. Now here is a copy of the Sefer I Came This Day to the Spring, which is a treatise on Sabbatian Kabbalah and is attributed to Rabbi Yonatan Eibeshutz, who was the Dayan of Prague, as I said. For those of you that wish to be more educated on the matter, I encourage you to go look at the Wikipedia page specifically on Rav Eibeshutz, for his halakhic status still stands, so on and so forth. Now he writes over here a couple of shocking things, and I'll point out just a couple of them. For example, he writes, "Know that the God of Israel is at times the recipient of anal sex, as implied in the words, I made love to Israel boy fashion. Know also in the future time when the insolent waters are gone from the earth and the Tehiru is purified, the Shekhinah will engage in anal sex in the lower realms. This is the secret of what the Gemara tells us, that a woman will bear a child each day, and he showed him a hen, which gives birth through the anus. Understand. And this was the symbolism of carrying the Torah scroll into the latrine, also understand." So the reference in regards to the matter, he's quoting the Babylonian Talmud in Tractate Shabbos 30b, and it says, when Rab Gamliel, he's preaching that in the Messianic times a woman will bear a child each day, a student mocks him. Gamliel offers to show the student an example of this in the present world and produces a hen, which lays an egg every day. The contemporary hen is therefore a token of the Messianic age woman, and the hen, our author points out, lays eggs through her anus. She and the female, whom she betokens, may suppose it to copulate in the same way. So they use this as a theological reasoning and understanding for the pushing forth of sodomy. Again, because in that orgiac-filled world of the fullness, the pleroma, which they identify with the Tehiru, a primary teaching behind the red Jew understanding is that everything is inverted there, and therefore what is forbidden here is permissible there, and we must make this world like the upper world. Now, continuing on forward, we will find the following statement as well. So another very important understanding is that similarly, the soul of the true Messiah was expelled by the God of Israel through the urinary aperture, and thus he was called Seth. And this is because the word Seth here is associated with the word shittim, which is to say urine. And therefore, he's saying that the Messiah was emerged from the urinary aperture. And he goes on to say the following. As we find in a number of places in the Midrash of Seth, the Bible says, God has placed for me another seed. An example, seed coming from another place. The aspect of seed here, thus, is obviously emerging from the penis, in which they identify here Seth as coming from the urinary aperture. And regarding this, they said, namely the soul of the Messiah, because in one of the Midrash, it identifies Seth as being the root of the Mashiach, who was born from another place, not the seminal aperture, but the urinary. And so it says, God has placed for me another seed. He is interpreting this to say not from the aspect of semen, but rather from the other tube, which is the urinary aperture. And again, the word Seth in Hebrew, he's giving an equation to the word shittim, which here means urine. Now he's going to recourse this to the word Bereshis, which is Bereshit, hinting to created shittim, meaning created through urine. And so he says, this is the Spirit of God hovering over the face of the waters while darkness was upon the face of the deep, which the Spirit, the Midrash, identifies as the Spirit of the Messiah. And so in this, they believe that the waters that are in the beginning, that the Spirit of God is vibrating over, is the Spirit of the Messiah vibrating over the urinary aperture, for he had emerged in this primordial urine. And so it states over here that the insolent waters of the abyss darkens that place of the Tehiru, because the Tehiru is this urine-filled, orgiafic world in which all these Partsufim are intermingled, so on and so forth, in these types of inversions, as I was pointing out at the beginning of this. Now, there are many other shocking aspects that need to be talked about, so on and so forth. And so, for example, it's going to mention, or Y.I.R.A.H mentions, that the God of Israel is associated with Pharaoh, amongst many other different shocking claims. Now, again, this is just the beginning of a huge slew and retinue of very, 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 very esoteric and clearly at the Peshat level disturbing teachings, which is precisely the reason why he was brought up on charges of heresy for being a Sabbatean. Although he would be exonerated from these accusations, nonetheless, this Sepher stands as a testament to these teachings. Now, as we continue into this series, I'm going to be combining and revealing the theological and cosmological structure behind these Sabbatean Frankists and their teachings. Again, when you hear people talking about the Tehiru, and when you hear people talking about the Red Jew, and when you hear people talking about Edom, you must understand the root of this is in Yaakov Frank. Now, I've revealed to you what the secret of the Tehiru is, and the secret of urine. And for this reason, they'll say things like the Mashiach is a mamzer, meaning a bastard child, and so on and so forth. And they also will equate this to the boiling pit of excrement, or so on and so forth. However, there's another deep understanding to it. The reason why Yaakov Frank tasked his Frankist followers to going into Christianity in particular and taking up the moniker of the Red Jew, which some say was even before that, according to lineage that they, as I said, trace to Israel Sarug and others, is that the entire intention behind it was to introduce these teachings over into the Christian world, so on and so forth. Now, I have to preface this by saying that classical and traditional Kabbalah does not go by any of these understandings. And although even in this instance, there are ways of understanding it without falling into the corruption of certain ideas, so on and so forth, nonetheless, this is not the point nor place to expound any type of apologetics regarding what he could have possibly have intended by some of these words, which in their Peshat are incredibly shocking. Nonetheless, the Frankists, who absolutely did interpret these things at the Peshat level in the simple understanding, are now espousing these teachings en masse. And so you'll see that they sought to invert everything. For example, the inversion of proper sexual intercourse by being through anal, so on and so forth. And also, again, instead of the seed of life, the opposite, which is urination, so on and so forth. And you'll find a lot of these bizarre things that are occurring in the higher levels of perversion and corruption and so on and so forth. Now, one of the other prevailing ideas behind the aspects of what they believe is that there's something called the reshimu, which is a type of residue that builds up upon the world during the process of its corruption. And they believe they need to taint the kli, meaning taint the vessel of the planet to such a degree that it'll force the coming of the Mashiach in order to stop it from being destroyed ultimately. They do this by transgression. For every sin, they believe, builds up a little bit of the reshimu. Obviously, it began only with themselves transgressing and inverting everything, and wherever it says don't do something, they did the opposite. Later, it would then adopt into cult-like practices and communal-like practices until the realization befell them that it took more than that. They needed to corrupt the entire world. And so based off of that understanding, there were certain things that occurred and certain institutions that were brought up and took place in which would promote these ideas and ultimately seek to undermine the very foundations of the three Abrahamic faiths, which they saw as direct opposition to the goal, meaning that these three pillars of faith ultimately were standing and representing for an aspect of tikkun or correction in the world in order to make people morally upright, so on and so forth. And they needed to undermine these messages and undermine these teachings, so on and so forth, in order to further the corruption of the planet. Now, of course, this falls into many different conspiratorial realms, and many different conspiracies, so on and so forth, can be built off from this. The point of this particular lesson and to expose all of these things is not to give you conspiracy, but rather to display the theological reasonings behind what the actual Frankists believed. The intention is not for you to apply this to everything that is going on, although they seem to line up in many different instances as to the explaining of the reasonings of the very bizarre behaviors and so on and so forth, and the accusations that we've been regularly seeing and receiving. So to return into the understanding of what was going on here, they believe that the God of Israel was a recipient there, as was stated, of anal sex. And this is a justification for walking in the ways of the Lord, in which they believe they themselves should be partaking in this. They also believe in deceit. Jacob Frank famously said that in his entire life he will never tell the truth. And so these red Jews, which are these crypto Jews, which preach, again, the crossing of the Simbachan River, secretly have theological reasonings and perhaps even practices that deal with these very bizarre behaviors. So again, forewarning, whenever you hear anyone preaching the red Jews crossing the Simbachan River, it's a euphemism for passing over into the gnosis of the cosmological Y.I.R.A.H, the fall from the urine-filled Tehiru where all of their orgies took place, and ultimately to transmit the transgressive teachings which would further or accelerate the correction of the world by the destruction of the world. And then ultimately the aim and goal thereof is to teach the initiate in order to engage themselves in these types of behaviors through theological reasonings, which is incredibly, incredibly dangerous. And the reason why I've taken myself to not only discuss this here and reveal their theological understandings, but to raise the red flag and to caution all of those that are seeking to understand matters of the Kabbalah or anything else from partaking in any of these types of teachings, which are to the desecration of the soul highly dangerous. And I guess highly dangerous really isn't even the word to describe it. To say it's a Chilul Hashem, that's their intention. So with that being said, let us go back in time to the revelations at hand regarding the unions of Abba, Ima, Zeranpin, and Nukva. Shalom everybody. This video is unlike any other video on this channel. Its content will be explosive and beyond revelatory, even world-shaking. For the first time anywhere, the true mysteries of the elite and the higher perversions that occurred will be made known. And with these keys, one will see with clear eyes the great evil that is occurring at the highest levels in secret. I must first preface, it would be highly profitable to have an understanding first of Shabtai Tzvi, Yaakov Frank, and others. A great sefer by Robert Sepher called 1666 Redemption Through Sin will provide a great overview behind the nature of the historical events that occurred. But unlike that sefer, we will begin to understand the true esoteric nature of what has occurred and how these teachings in place of the true light have spread throughout many occult organizations is the foundation and root of many of these things, and with it we will behold what many of these societies are up to, and more importantly, the reason why. Now, it is also very important that although these mysteries will be revealed through the Kabbalah and they will be extraordinarily revelatory, in no way do any of these things have anything to do with Judaism or Jews at all. Therefore, no part of this video should be taken as anti-Semitic in any way. And neither should any of these keys or mysteries be applied to Judaism in any way. Viewer discretion is advised. Much of this content is of a very mature nature and not suitable for everyone. That being said, let us begin. According to many different sources, the Bavarian Order of the Illuminati was founded by Yaakov Frank, Adam Weishaupt, and Mayer Amschel Rothschild. However, this order of the Illuminati was only the outer order. In fact, according to some sources, Adam Weishaupt was in relations with the daughter of Yaakov Frank named Eve Frank, and that these two were an archetypal Adam and Eve of a new age or era. To fully understand the nature of what is going to be said, we must first understand that this order of the Illuminati, who pushed forward very liberal ideas, was but an outer or more exoteric order compared to the more esoteric inner order. The more esoteric inner order were followers of Shabtai Tzvi, a group some called the Dunme, although this name was given by their enemies and not a name that they themselves called themselves by. It is also important to note that at the time this order was operating, they were already excommunicated. this being that they were not a part of Judaism itself. Now, this more inner group practiced very bizarre rituals and the laws of inversion. This law came about from a very esoteric reading of certain passages in the Talmud, reciting a specific story in which a young boy had a near-death experience and he went into the upper worlds. And when he returned, it was asked, "My son, what did you see?" And he responded, "Father, I saw a reversed world, a world where the lower beings were above and the higher beings were below." And it was responded to him, "My son, you have seen a perfect world." Now let us enter in to the great perversions that occurred at the absolute highest levels. It is known amongst very learned Kabbalists that these perversions occurred amidst the Lurianic Kabbalah. This being said, the Lurianic Kabbalah is a very closed practice and is very advanced. Most people require 30 or 40 years of study before they can even begin to study Lurianic Kabbalah with any type of seriousness. And even then, and even beyond these levels, do they actually enter into the levels of revealing it. In order for us to understand these mysteries, we must first lay down some foundational understanding. We'll begin with the concept of the interactions between a Partsufim named Ima and a Partsufim named Zerainpin. The source for this tikkun will be in Eitz Chaim Shabagan, a sefer that displays the tikkunim for Eitz Chaim. Now it must be understood first that the Netzach, Hod, and Yisod of one world form the Chokmah, Bina, and Da'as of another world. And it must also be understood that the Netzach, Hod, and Yisod of Ima contain inside of it the Netzach, Hod, and Yisod of Abba. Now, Zerainpin is called son. Ima means mother, and Abba means father. I will first give the holy explanation, as I am the only one who has ever openly revealed this mystery, and before this matter was made known in Likkutei Yirah, it had never been known. The understanding is that the Netzach, Hod, and Yisod of Ima, an example the mother, this would refer to the two hips in the reproductive organ, is the location where the brains of the baby developed, an example it's Chokmah, Bina, and Da'as. And in absence of the true revelator, they made horrendous errors. Now I will reveal how it was interpreted by the Frankists. It must be understood that what we're dealing with at these levels is a group and an organization that are incredibly initiated into the most advanced and esoteric levels of the Kabbalah. For this reason, there was an outer and an inner order. The outer order, as stated before, was for the uninitiated and more exoteric and non-lineal. However, the inner order remained a group of heretics that had long been separated from Judaism itself. They and this group, having been excommunicated, continued in many of the same traditions that were found amongst Judaism, although they themselves were no longer a part of Judaism. This inner order practiced the secrets and the traditions that were laid down by Shabtai Tzvi. They understood the concept of a new Torah that was coming, the Torah of Atzilus. Atzilus means emanation, and as it had just been made known to you, was revealed for the first time, the emanatory level of these secrets. That is to say, we see the brains of the baby are developed in the Netzach Hod Yisod of its mother. At the time, they did not have access to these teachings, neither during the time of Jacob Frank. However, in absence of the truth, another interpretation was laid in its place. We must also understand that Ima means mother, Abba means father, and Zerayinpin means son, for Zerayinpin is the son of Ima and Abba. I will quote from Moach Gan Eden, The Brain of the Garden of Eden, written by the chief magician of Mystery Babylon. It states on page 135, through Tavunah he founded the heavens, Proverbs chapter 3 verse 19. That is to say, through Bina, which is called Tavunah, he founded the heavens, an example the Partsufim called Zerayinpin. All in the mystery of Tavunah and Zerayinpin. Now, the word he founded may also signify to be erect, or firm, or hard, meaning the sexual arousal of Zerayinpin comes by way of Bina, channeling her Hasidim through Tavunah to Zerayinpin, as explained in the Lurianic texts. So, the Oedipus complex is simply a hidden, subtle residual image of this higher archetypal construct, and these holy mysteries are explained in the Lurianic texts, where we read, the mouth of Yisod of Ima opened in the midst of Zerayinpin, Sha'ar Pasukim, Parashas Bereshis, Siman 4. And the Yisod of Ima spread until the chest of Zerayinpin, Parashas Y.I.R.A.H, Siman 28. And it was explained that the Netzach, Hod, and Yisod of Ima form the Chokmah, Bina, and Da'as of Zerayinpin. And it is explaining that the Yisod of Ima spread until the chest of Zerayinpin. That is to say, his Tiferet, which is identified as the chest. Now, there is a concept of the Hasidim and Gevurot that enter into Da'as, as is shown here. These 5 Hasidim and 5 Gevurot enter in to the Da'as of Zerayinpin from Chokmah and Bina. They spread through his body in the aforementioned manner. Now we may understand the nature of our foundations for what is about to be said. So in absence of the Atzil level and the inability to interpret these mysteries in the sublime and esoteric way, it was rendered into the literal, from which it was derived the following. And see there and the many other places in his gates where he discusses the ejaculation of the revealed light, which are the Chasadim of Ima's phallus into Zerayinpin. Yisod is the reproductive organ, and how they interpreted this is that the Netzach Hod Yisod entering into the Chokmah Bina Da'as of Zerayinpin meant that the phallus of Yisod, which they identify as a hermaphroditic figure, entered into the Da'as, or the throat of Zerayinpin, for the throat of the body is identified with the sphere of Da'as. They then interpret that the Chasadim and Gevurot spreading in Da'as is the ejaculation coming from Ima. He continues, and this phallus extends all the way down to the phallus of Zerayinpin, touching it and arousing it. And they see that the Yisod of Ima enters in to the Da'as of Zerayinpin, which they interpret it as the phallus of Ima entering into the throat of Zerayinpin, and that this extends downward to the Yisod of Zerayinpin, by which they say Zerayinpin is aroused. And so he continues, and there are many other numerous examples of transgenderism, anal sex, oral sex, homosexuality, incest, etc., all parabolized throughout the Lurianic texts describing the actions and processes of the highest universes. I will simply provide one more very super esoteric telistic example proving the permissibility of homosexuality, incestuous pedophilia in the highest universe. Behold, it is written, when the Yisod of Abba spread in the midst of the Yisod of Zerainpin, this is called Seth, the son of Adam Arishon. He quotes Chaim Vital Sha'ar HaKadmot 45b. Again, not only do we see Ima penetrate her son, but also Abba penetrates his own son. Because the Netzach Hod Yisod of Ima spread into Da'as and Tiferes, and the Yisod of Abba specifically spreads all the way down to the Yisod of Zerainpin, they interpreted this as these deranged and bizarre acts of incest, etc. What is important to understand about the nature of all of this is that they had a belief that this lower world needed to be made in the likeness of the upper world, and that accordingly what was forbidden in this world was permissible in the upper world, and therefore their idea was that this world must be made in the likeness of the upper world. And so they began to engage in all of these types of bizarre practices, bringing down all of these horrendous interactions with each other and committing all types of heinous acts in order to, in their mind and eyes, reflect the higher order of the upper worlds. Now, the problem with this is that these people who engage in all of these extraordinarily disturbing, incestuous, and pedophiliac behaviors do this as a form of religion. And because we're dealing with people that are incredibly learned in the Kabbalah, and because we're dealing with people that are doing this in an incredibly religious way, we fail to understand the true level of the dangers that we're discussing here. But with this, we may understand why we see all of the bizarre rituals that are occurring at the highest levels, all of the pedophilia, all of the transgenderism, all of the homosexual incest, and everything else that is going on at the highest levels amongst these supposed occult organizations and these bizarre groups of certain elites, etc. And why all of these agendas, etc., are being pushed in one way or another. Because those individuals are pushing this world to be a reflective order of what they believe the higher world is the image of. He continues onward, and he states, and if a man shall take his sister, his father's daughter, or his mother's daughter, and see her nakedness, it is chesed, a reproach, a disgrace. Sepher Yirah, Leviticus 20:17. He goes on, this is very interesting. We all know that chesed signifies loving kindness to the highest degree. And as we have with many words in Hebrew, every word in Hebrew is binary in essence, containing with it its thesis and antithesis. And this is clearly displayed with the word chesed. On the most esoteric level, this verse is actually referring to the chesed between Zerainpin and Malkut, brother and sister. And the universe is higher than Asiya. And so we have our first clear example of the dictum cited above. In our universe, incest is forbidden, but in the higher universes, among Ha'elokim, incest is permitted. And this is the holy mystery of the holy incestuous union between Naomi and Ruth, and the mystery of Bina and Malchut, as explained in Sefer Tzadik Yisar Ha'olam. He continues, and this brings us to the Jewish Sigmund Freud's Oedipus complex, which has its roots in the deepest, most esoteric levels of Kabbalah. For as already explained, holy sexual incest between the Divine Mother and her Divine Son is chesed, loving kindness. For it is the sphere of chesed that is the nexus and link between mother and son. Also, the fact that Abba and Ima containing these spheros were hermaphroditic in nature. An example, in addition to them having a female reproductive organ, they had a male reproductive organ. We see that the Yisod of Ima contains the Yisod of Abba. Well, the Yisod of Ima means the reproductive organ of a woman, and the Yisod of Abba means the reproductive organ of a male, and that these hermaphroditic entities are penetrating the sun, an example, Zerampin, in various different bizarre ways, from the throat to the rectum, etc. And the same thing happens with the Nukva, or the daughter. From this, there are also other secrets. An example, because the spheros of Abba are inside of the spheros of Ima, we see that from their interpretations, Abba puts on the garments of Ima, or the father puts the garments of the mother. Or an example, men should look like women. And similarly, we find that Ima garbs herself inside of Zerampin. An example, Ima garbs herself in the likeness of her son, and therefore women should become like men. We begin to behold deeper things like this, including the aspect of the Nukva and the kings of Edom. And we know that when the Nukva first emerged, it emerged in the aspect of death. It is known that Nukva is the secret of David, or Dodai, or my beloved, and it is known that he was born dead. And so we find a great promotion, an example of abortions and the death of babies. Sometimes you hear bizarre cases of ritualistic births for the purpose of sacrifices, things like this. We know that the limbs of Adam HaRishon fell off, as it were. We find that these things often reflect in the order of these limbs being torn off, etc. And there's incredibly dark, deep things that are way beyond the scope of this video. And again, we find ourselves here, now having revealed just a breadcrumb of the nature of the understanding of these elites and occult organizations that are operating at the highest levels, and the reason why they are doing it. And this is way beyond Satanism. For those who call themselves Satanists, in fact, are more humanist in nature. They would be staunchly against many of the things that were just stated. But we find that through this horrendous corruption and disfigurement of the true esoteric keys, the elite, who in their own understanding believe themselves to be superior intellectually with a higher IQ and SQ than the rest of the world, having themselves studied these mysteries and having themselves been initiated into the highest levels of these mysteries, only for themselves to have been introduced a horrendous corruption. And this corruption then formed the basis for a new religion, a secret religion, which is now pushed upon the entire world, though the world does not know it. Yet, if you open your eyes and look around you, you will see it everywhere. A religion where these secret keys that were just laid down before you are the central basis of reality, where this world is to reflect the upper world. And in the same likeness, all of these interactions become permissible as opposed to forbidden. And so we have come to the conclusion of this particular video. With the revelations that have been made known to you, if you should gaze and peer behind the OTO and the perversions of all of the Western occultists, who they themselves are but bastardized versions of these inner esoteric Frankist teachings, and should you probe the highest mysteries of the elite, to find amongst them these hidden teachings, you will see clearly the great evil that has subdued the world, and the reason why the world is moving in the direction that it is moving. Perhaps there will be a part 2 of such horrifying revelations where there is still yet but more mysteries at hand. Consider very carefully the disturbing things that were made mention of in this video. It is encouraged for you all to either share or save this video, as I don't imagine it will last very long. It is incredibly imperative that the correction to all of these mysteries be made known, as it was revealed the true Atziluthic level, because in absence of understanding that the Netzach Hod Yesod of Ima forms the brains of the baby's development, in absence of the Torah of Atzilus, these things fell into great perversion, and a likeness of the other emerged, and the world has been corrupted by the failing of understanding these levels properly. In great ignorance, the world has been led astray. And now many people have been led astray, and at the highest levels, they are performing all types of bizarre rituals amongst each other and amongst other elite. The Western orders have become completely corrupt, completely sexualized and perverse, such as the OTO and other organizations, such as the Rosicrucians and more. We find the bizarre parties, or as one person said, the Diddy parties in the Epstein Islands, and all of the other disgusting, abominable things that are occurring amongst those elite, who they themselves more than likely know, to some degree or another, all of these mysteries, for which they ritualistically reenact. And it is precisely for this reason all of the mysteries of the Torah of Atzilus must be revealed and corrected. We must reveal the underlying illimitable as the true cause of reality, and restore the true light in place of this false light, which has, as a garment, concealed these things. And unfortunately, these things were done in ignorance, for they themselves, having not accessed the true Torah of Atzilus, took only a likeness in its place. With that being said, Shalom and Selah. Shalom, everybody. This is a part 2 to the series, The True Religion of Evil. Before watching this video, it is encouraged that you will have seen part 1. A link for that video will be in the comment section down below. With that being said, in this video, we will do a deep dive into the religious belief systems and practices of the hidden elite and the great perversions that occurred. Let's begin.
Secretly participated in same-gender sexuality, and they quote various passages from the New Testament to demonstrate that. So he united male and female in his own person through the practice of same-gender sacred sexuality. Shabtai Tzvi even more so, because there is recorded by Sholem that Shabtai Tzvi was having anal intercourse with an Arab boy in the presence of many rabbis, And he said to them, this is a tikkun of God. This is a healing of God. This is a reunification of male and female in God.
In part 1, there was an overview behind the teachings of Shabtai Zevi and Yaakov Frank. We discussed the secret interpretation of the interconnection between the Partufim called Ima, meaning mother, and the Partufim called Zerainpin, an example, son. Here we will provide a brief recap. But first, a recap on Shabtai Zevi and Yaakov Frank.
Declared himself to be the Jewish Messiah in the year 1666. This false Messiah led the largest Messiah movement in Jewish history and attracted more than half the population of European Jews. Sabbatai Zevi made everything that was holy unholy. He rejected the rules of the Jewish holy books and every standard of Jewish decency. There would be no more guilt or sin or right or wrong. No more sexual taboos, no more 10 commandments, no more fasting. Instead, there would be feasting. Sabbatai Zevi's immoral leadership finally fell from grace when the Sultan of Turkey threatened him with torture unless he converted to Islam. Sabbatai converted to Islam, but he brought his infectious evil theology with him. 1 century later, Jacob Frank proclaimed himself to be the reincarnation of Sabbatai Zevi and the living Messiah for all Jews. Not even Sabbatai Zevi was as evil as Jacob Frank and his disciples. Jacob Frank rejected traditional Judaism. He reversed the truth and told his followers, since we can't all be saints, let's all be sinners. The best way to imitate God, said Frank, is to cross every boundary, transgress every taboo, and mix, as God did, the sacred with the profane. Orgies, incest, rape, and sexual intercourse with children, including sodomy on young boys, were no longer sinful. Followers were called Sabbatean Frankists. They practiced witchcraft and occult rituals, including animal and human sacrifices. Lucifer, they declared, was the true God. The Sabbatean Frankists expanded their movement by masquerading as converts to other religions. They converted to Catholicism and to Islam, where they embedded themselves and spread their Luciferian infection as closeted crypto-Jews. The Frankists traded their wives and daughters with members and with powerful non-members who they needed to seduce into their cult. Jewish professor Gershon Scholem called Jacob Frank one of the most frightening men in Jewish history. By 1776, Orthodox Jewish rabbis and leaders rejected Jacob Frank and the pagan invasion of evil that took hold in 18th century Europe. They declared Jacob Frank and his Luciferian followers to be heretics. Jewish author and historian Dr. Henry Makow has thoroughly researched the Sabbatean Frankist movement.
Sabbatean Frankists were out and out Satanists.
they believe that they have to defy any kind of natural morality, defy any kind of natural law, defy God, and they actually indulge in every kind of depravity as a form of worship, because they worship Satan. And they promoted promiscuity, and that's where our promiscuity today comes from. It's 200 or 300 years old. There's nothing new or avant-garde about it. They promoted incest, they promoted pedophilia, and every kind of sexual depravity.
Our source will be from Moach Gan Eden, the brain of the Garden of Eden, by the chief magician of Mystery Babylon, a self-proclaimed Sabbatean Frankist. And it was stated in part 1, in the gates to the highest universe on page 133, it's written, there is a huge difference between our universe and the higher universes, but the highest universe, which I must now say is not the universe to come, is very special indeed. A little context is needed, and behold, it is written, and Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi said, these are people who are considered important in this universe and unimportant in the universe to come. This is like the incident involving Rabbi Yosef, son of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, who became ill and was about to expire. When he returned to good health, his father said to him, what did you see when you were about to die? He said to him, I saw an inverted universe. Those above were below, while those below were above. He said to him, my son, you have seen a clear or purified universe. Talmud Bavli Tractate Pesachim 50a. There are many holy mysteries here. This is to teach us that there are aspects to the higher universes that are nothing like our universe, and in some respects a certain aspect and matters are a complete inversion with respect to our universe. And let us go deeper, shall we? I will begin with a super esoteric level to the mitzvah of the Torah, and lo, it is written, and if a man shall take his sister, his father's daughter, or his mother's daughter, and see her nakedness, and she see his nakedness, it is chesed, a reproach, a disgrace. Leviticus 20:17. He writes, this is very interesting. We all know that chesed signifies loving kindness to the highest degree. And as we have with many words in Hebrew, every Hebrew word is binary in essence, containing with it its thesis and antithesis, and this is clearly displayed with the word chesed. On the most esoteric level, this verse is actually referring to the chesed between Zoranpin and Malkut, brother and sister. And the universe is higher than Asiya, and so we have our first clear example of the dictum cited above. In our universe, incest is forbidden, but in the higher universes among Ha'elokim, incest is permitted. And this is the holy mystery of the holy incestuous union between Naomi and Ruth in the mystery of Bina and Malkuth, as explained in Sefer Tzadik Yisad HaOlam. He continues, and this brings us to the Jewish Sigmund Freud's Oedipus complex, which has its roots in the deepest, most esoteric levels of Kabbalah. For as already explained, holy sexual incest between the Divine Mother and her Divine Son is chesed. For it is the Sepher of chesed that is the nexus and link between mother and son, and this is the mystery of, through Tevuna, he founded the heavens, Proverbs chapter 3, verse 19. All in the mystery of Tevuna and Zoranpin. Now, he founded may also signify to be erect or firm or hard, meaning the sexual arousal of Zoranpin comes by way of Bina, channeling her chasadim through Tevuna to Zoranpin, as it is explained in the Lurianic texts. So the Oedipus complex is simply a hidden, subtle residual image of this higher archetype and construct. And these holy mysteries are explained in the Lurianic texts, where we read, and the mouth of Yisad of Ima opened in the midst of Zoranpin, Sha'ar Pesukim, Parashas Bereshis Siman 4. And the Yisad of Ima spread until the chest of Zoranpin, Parashas Vayetzi Siman 28. And it was explained that the Netzach Hod Yisad of the Partsufim Ima formed the Chokmah Bina Da'as of the Partsufim named Zoranpin. And the Yisad of Ima spreads in Da'as of Zoranpin, an example, the throat. And it extends down to the chest, an example, Tiferet. And the Yesod of Abba, which is within inside of the Yesod of Ima, spreads to the Yesod of Zerainpin. Having this understanding in the Lurianic context, we read further and see there are many other places in his gates where he discusses the ejaculation of the revealed lights that are the Chasadim of Ima's phallus into Zerainpin. They interpret the Yesod of Ima, which contains the Yesod of Abba, to be hermaphroditic in nature, and that the Partsuf of Ima contains both a female reproductive organ and a male reproductive organ. And they interpret this literally, that the Yesod of Ima, which contains the Yesod of Abba, enters into Da'as of Zerainpin, which they interpret to be the throat. This is where the spreading of the Chesadim and Gevuros takes place, which they identify as ejaculation. Thus, Ima, being a hermaphrodite, is penetrating Zerainpin, which is her son, and this is an incestuous relationship as it was being described. Furthermore, it continues, and this phallus extends all the way down to the phallus of Zerainpin, touching it and arousing it. And there are many other numerous examples of transgenderism, anal sex, oral sex, homosexuality, incest, and etc., all parabolized throughout the Lurianic texts, describing the actions and process of the highest universes. I will simply provide one more very super esoteric telistic example, proving the permissibility of homosexual incestuous pedophilia in the highest universe. And behold, it is written, when the Yesod of Abba spread in the midst of the Yesod of Zerainpin, this is called Seth, the son of Adam Rishon. Again, not only do we see Ima penetrate her son, but also Abba penetrates his own son. And this is the mystery of Seth, which also signifies buttocks. This is the mystery of, because he is the young boy Israel, I made love to him. Sepher Hosea 11:1. So we see that the Yesod of Abba extends to the Yesod of Zerainpin, which is identified as Seth, which he interprets here to be buttocks. And the spreading of the Yesod of Abba into the buttocks of, or Yesod of Zerainpin, is this incestuous relationship between father and son, and also between mother and son, which was identified as a hermaphroditic interaction. And he uses these cases to describe that in the upper worlds, pedophilia is occurring, as well as many other incestuous relationships. Now, of course, all of this is of the highest perversion. And as a result of this, in their failing to understand the true Atziluthic level, they interpreted it in these klipothic literal ways, and in having interpreted it these literal ways, they then sought to make this reality a reflection of that reality. And they said to themselves that this reality must reflect the order of the upper reality, and so they sought to make this reality in that image. Therefore, amongst the elite and amongst private class practices, they began to partake in these horrendous rituals. We find that Abba is inside of Ima, and therefore the male would put on the garments of the female. We find that Ima was inside of Zerainpin, and so the female would put on the garments of the male. It is also known that the kings of Edom died, and this referred to Malkuth, or the baby. And therefore, in many of their practices, it involved the ritualistic sacrifice of babies and children, the removal of the limbs. As it is known, the limbs of Adam Kadmon fell off. And these bizarre practices have been recorded, an example seen here.
Yes, was used also in worshiping the devil, participated in human sacrifice rituals and cannibalism. She says her family has been involved in rituals for generations. She is currently in extensive therapy, suffers from multiple personality disorder, meaning she's blocked out many of the terrifying and painful memories of her childhood. Meet Rachel, who is also in disguise to protect her identity. You come from generations of ritualistic abuse?
Yes, my family has an extensive family tree, and they keep track of who's been involved and who hasn't been involved. And it's gone back to like 1700.
And so you were...
Right. I was born into a family that believes in this.
And does everyone else think it's a nice Jewish family? From the outside, you appear to be a nice Jewish girl.
Definitely.
And you all are worshiping the devil inside the home?
Right. There's other Jewish families across the country. It's not just my own family.
Really? And so who knows about it? Lots of people now.
I talked to a police detective in the Chicago area, and several of my friends know, and I've spoke publicly before. And
so when you were brought up in this kind of evilness, did you just think it was normal?
I've blocked out a lot of the memories I had because of my multiple personality disorder. But yes, I mean, it's like if you grow up with something, you think it's normal. Mm-hmm. I always thought...
So what kinds of things? You don't have to give us the gory details, but what kinds of things went on in the family?
Well, there would be rituals in which babies would be sacrificed, and you would have to, you know...
Babies?
There were people who bred babies in our family. No one would know about it. A lot of people were overweight, so you couldn't tell if they were pregnant or not, or they would supposedly go away for a while and then come back. The other thing I want to point out, not all Jewish people sacrifice babies. I mean, no, it's not a very difficult thing.
This is the first time I heard of any Jewish people sacrificing babies. But anyway, so you witnessed the sacrifice?
Right. When I was very young, I was forced to participate in that, in which I had to sacrifice an infant.
And the purpose of sacrifice is to what? Is to bring you what? What are you sacrificing for?
For power.
Uh-huh. Power. And so, were you ever used? Were you ever used yourself?
I was molested. I was raped several times.
And what's your mother doing?
She's...
In all of this? What's her role in all of this?
I'm not exactly what her role is. I haven't, recovered all of my memories, but her family was extremely involved. Mm-hmm. She brought me to it. Both of my parents brought me to it.
And where is she now?
She lives in the Chicago metropolitan area. She's on the Human Relations Commission of the town that she lives in, and she's an upstanding citizen. Nobody would suspect her.
Were you raised with a sense of right and wrong, Rachel?
Yes. I mean, it's like I had both. I mean, to the outside world, everything we did was proper and right, and then there were the nights that things changed, that things just got turned around. What was wrong was right, and what was right was wrong. That's what helps to create somebody to develop MPD.
Mm-hmm. Multiple personalities.
Right.
Now, in your family, did you all call it worshiping the devil?
No, I don't know.
It was just evil, things you did.
Right. Well, I said it was evil, and they said it was good. There's a book that I had just come across called Lilith's Cave, which is a book of Jewish mysticism and supernatural, and there's a lot in that book that relates to what I, endured when I was a child.
Now, in the gate of the opening of the tent, he continues, we have already explained how sight is all in the mystery of sexual copulation in another gate. See there. So he states, and Yudke Vavke appeared unto him in the plains of Mamre, and he sat in the opening of the tent in the heat of the day. The opening of the tent is all in the mystery of Malkuth and the divine pudendum. As is well known, Avraham is the mystery of Aver Ma, meaning the phallus of Ma. Abraham here represents the clitoris and phallus of Malkuth, an example of that androgynous nature, the hermaphroditic nature of having both the penis and the vagina. In Abraham is this representation. Accordingly, he continues on. The heat of the day alludes to the great sexual arousal taking place. 280 Imkalel, Mamre. These are all of the dinim judgments that are about to be channeled. 280 is the numerical value of the 5 Sophite letters, and these are the 5 Geburot. And these 5 Gevurot are being channeled, as it was spoken earlier about the Chasadim being channeled. In this place, the Gevurot are being channeled. It continues, and he lifted up his eyes and looked, and lo, 3 men stood by him, and when they saw him, and he ran to meet them from the opening of the tent, and they bowed toward the ground. Again, Abraham lifting up his eyes signifies sexual arousal and copulation. The term "and he ran" can be translated as "he desired," signifying sexual arousal. An example, "to meet them" can be translated as "ejaculated over them," coming from the root signifying ejaculation. The 3 men bend over, again signifying copulation. They prostrate towards the ground, who is Malkuth, since they are being penetrated by her phallus, who is Abraham. Now the 3 men may signify Chokmah, Bina, and Da'as of Beriah, who are receiving the Shefa from Malkuth of Atzilus, or they may signify the 3 universes below Malkuth of Atzilus, all receiving the Shefa from her, as is known. In the mystery of "Thy Malchus is the Malchus of all the universes." Next we read, "Let a little water, I pray you, be fetched, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree." Washing of feet signifies sexual copulation, is well known. This is the mystery of King David requesting Uriah to wash his feet, as explained by our ancient sages, and see there under the tree certainly, as it is written, "As the apple tree among the trees of the wood, so is my beloved among the sons. I sat down under his shadow with great delight, and his fruit was sweet to my taste." All in the mystery of fellatio. The tree is the phallus, or Abraham, given the name Avraham, is not mentioned here, and this is the supernal hint. So he states that the guests coming to meet Abraham in the heat of the day signified that they were being bent over by Abraham, and he was penetrating them rectally, and that this is a prime example of the necessity of the requirements of these types of copulations, these incestuous, pedophiliac, homosexual orgies that are taking place amongst these people. And he's advocating here that this story of Abraham and the 3 visitors signifies Abraham ejaculating over them, bending them over as they prostrate, and penetrating them. He then mentions that the washing of the feet of King David by Uriah is Uriah giving him homosexual fellatio. Under the tree, an example under the phallus. And he continues, next we read, "And he stood over them under the tree," meaning under the phallus, "and they did eat," an example of fellatio. "Over them certainly, and eating is all in the mystery of sexual copulation, as already explained in another gay, as it is written. Rav Yitzhak said, from the day the temple was destroyed, the taste of intercourse was taken and given to sinners. An example, the taste of intercourse. And so now he's hinting about the homosexual copulation of a male having another male's a penis in their mouth. So it states, stolen waters are sweet, and bread and eaten in secrecy is tasty. And see all the numerous places in the Talmud where eating represents sexual copulation. Regarding this, he gives a section in regards to the homosexual fellatio of man-on-man action. An example, Abraham ejaculating over these 3 other men, and David apparently having Uriah give him fellatio. Regarding Shabtai V, the Reb of the chief magician of Mystery Babylon says the following:
secretly participated in same-gender sexuality, and they quote various passages from the New Testament to demonstrate that. So he united male and female in his own person through the practice of same-gender sacred sexuality. Shabtai Tzvi even more so, because there is recorded by Sholem that Shabtai Tzvi was having anal intercourse with an Arab boy in the presence of many rabbis. And he said to them, this is a tikkun of God. This is a healing of God. This is a reunification of male and female in God.
Now these great perversions then culminated into magical ritual and practices by which they would seek to conceive spiritual and demonic entities, this being the secret practices of the OTO, a very perverted form of Western occultism that was founded by Sabbatean Frankist orders that continue to persist down the line. As seen in explanation here via their creation of the homunculus. Now, Aleister Crowley as well fell into these perversions, and one of his chief disciples would later go on to found one of the major jet propulsion companies that associated themselves with NASA. He too was in the practice of orgies and bizarre sexual practices in which he tried to impregnate a homunculus by the name of Babylon. And we see this as it is demonstrated here.
Quite a journey.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying this. So last time we kind of left off with this idea of a homunculus, this magically created being.
Right.
I'm really curious to hear more about this.
Well, it's a concept that really captures the imagination.
Yeah.
And you know, the book presents a few different interpretations of what the homunculus actually is.
Okay, well, what are those?
Well, one perspective is that it's a literal physical being.
Okay.
Created through alchemical processes.
So like a tiny human.
Like a tiny human, yeah.
Brought to life?
Brought to life in a lab.
Sort of magic.
Yeah, almost like a
Frankenstein kind of thing.
Yeah, Frankenstein, but with magic.
Right.
But the book does point out that achieving this would be incredibly difficult.
Sure.
Even for the most skilled magician. Right. So it's probably more of a theoretical possibility than a practical one.
What's the second interpretation?
The second interpretation focuses more on the psychological or spiritual level.
Okay.
So instead of a physical being,
right,
the homunculus represents a transformation within the individual.
So it's like it's not external, it's internal.
It's something that's cultivated through spiritual practice and magical work.
So kind of creating a new self.
Yeah, a new perfected self.
Right, a more evolved self.
Exactly. It's about spiritual evolution.
Okay, and then what about that third, darker interpretation?
Yeah, the third one's a bit more sinister.
Okay.
It suggests that the homunculus could be a demonic or spiritual entity that takes possession.
Like a possession,
Yeah, of a human being.
Okay.
Essentially replacing their soul.
So it's not creating something new. It's inviting something in.
Exactly. It's a spiritual takeover.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So we've got these different interpretations, but the book also outlines a specific method for creating one, right?
Yeah. And this is where the sex magic comes in.
Ah, of course.
It involves a carefully selected man and woman who engage in continuous ritualistic intercourse within a specially prepared temple.
All right, sounds intense.
Yeah, it's about harnessing that sexual energy and directing it towards a specific goal.
Okay.
And when the woman becomes pregnant, she's taken to a remote location, ideally like a vast desert, to minimize the chance of other souls.
Right, so you want to isolate.
Yeah, keep it controlled.
Right, and then what?
Well, then the magician performs daily evocations, calling forth the specific spirit that they want to embody.
So you're trying to shape...
You're shaping the soul of the homunculus.
Right. Even before it's born.
Wow. Okay. And throughout the pregnancy, the woman is surrounded by books and images and ideas that align with the nature.
Right, to kind of program it.
Yeah, you're programming the environment.
Right.
Creating the ideal conditions. For this spirit to take root.
So, and then the birth itself.
The birth, ideally, should be aligned with favorable astrological conditions.
So astrology plays a role, too.
Astrology, sex magic, spirit evocation.
Right, it's all coming together here.
Ritual, it's all woven together.
Wow.
And once the child is born, it has to be dedicated, purified, and consecrated.
Okay.
According to the specific planet or element or sign.
Right. So it's like you're customizing this being.
It's a custom-made spiritual being.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
And what's the end goal here?
Well, the book describes the end result as a being with a perfect human form,
Okay.
possessing all the powers and privileges of humanity,
Right.
but with this added essence
Okay.
of the chosen force.
So it's about power, ultimately.
It's about power, yeah.
Yeah.
The power to create life,
Right.
to shape destiny, and
Yeah.
to command this force.
It's pretty heady stuff.
It is.
By day, Jack Parsons seemed to be a man of science and logic. Little did his friends and family know that he was leading a double life, casting magic spells at night in the hopes that the universe would help his dreams come true. He met the magician Aleister Crowley and became deeply involved with the occult. They believed in a belief system called Thelema. Their mantra was, "Do what thou wilt," which was a way of manifesting their wants and desires into existence. Aleister Crowley had grown up in a strict Quaker household, where his parents raised him to read the Bible on a daily basis. Later in life, he was able to attend Cambridge University, where it became evident that he had a genius-level IQ. He wholly rejected the teachings of the Bible and focused instead on secularism. However, anything against Christianity was interpreted as being demonic. Crowley fully embraced this as part of his identity, calling himself the Beast and attempting to summon powerful demons to come to his aid. From the time Jack Parsons was experimenting with rockets in his backyard as a kid, the idea that man could actually go into space was still a fantasy. Many people refused to believe that it could one day be real. And while it's hard for us to imagine now, the mere suggestion that man could reach the moon was considered to be rather sinful. While Thelema has plenty of spooky and paranormal elements to their religion, their core belief system was actually not too far away from many New Age beliefs and modern-day publications like The Secret, which calls the concept the law of attraction. Practitioners of Thelema did, in fact, believe in magic, but it wasn't just card tricks and parlor games. They practiced sex magic, which is exactly what it sounds like. They believed that the intense feeling people have while having an orgasm opens a gate to the universe. They believed that in that small window of opportunity, it is possible for a human being to perform a magic spell. All they really needed to do to perform this spell was to focus on their intention while having sex, and their wish would come true because it was put out into the universe. Jack Parsons became the leader of his own group, and they would have huge sex magic orgies at his mansion in Pasadena. Not surprisingly, Parsons' wife did not enjoy this sort of lifestyle, so she left him. He began to have an affair with his wife's sister, Sarah Northrop Hollister, who believed very strongly in the occult. Unlike her sister, she actually enjoyed participating in these orgies, and Jack Parsons was just one of many men in the group that she would practice sex magic with. While it may not surprise anyone, Aleister Crowley was addicted to sex, and multiple orgasms in one day were no longer enough to satisfy him. He experimented with drugs, and he eventually became addicted to heroin, which was his downfall. At one of Jack Parsons' meetings, he and Sarah Hollister met a science fiction writer named L. Ron Hubbard. If that name sounds familiar to you, it's because Hubbard would go on to found the cult of Scientology. But at this time, he was one of the very few sci-fi writers who were writing in such detail about the possibility of sending humans into space. As a hardcore sci-fi nerd, Jack Parsons was thrilled to meet L. Ron Hubbard and invited him to join in on their parties as much as he wanted. Parsons believed that he could summon a goddess named Babylon. She is described as being the great mother of the earth and a symbol of sexually liberated women. He asked his followers to participate in a project called the Babylon Working. He thought that through all of these sex magic rituals, the Scarlet Woman would come along to give birth to the Moon Child. They believed that this child could be raised to aspire to travel to space instead of holding on to the comforts of Earth. They never actually gave birth to a real baby because they hoped that this would be more of a symbolic gesture for future generations of mankind. The Scarlet Woman was a symbol of free love throughout the world, so people could have sex outside of marriage more openly. In a way, you could actually say that this spell actually worked. Just a few years later, the United States entered the space race, and the entire world turned on their televisions to watch the first steps onto the moon. In the 1960s, the hippies then spread the free love movement that Parsons had hoped for. Maybe, just maybe, all of that sex magic actually ended up working.
Now, this is at the limits of what can be said. The child sacrifice, pedophilia, bizarre orgies, hermaphroditic natures, and all of the great perversions of the elite, understand that the highest worlds were interpreted in this manner according to them, and thus the highest echelons of society here in this world reflect the orders of all of these perversions. Thus, at the highest levels of our societies, we find all of these perversions prevalent. There is much more that can be said, but this is far more than what need to be said. Without question, the mysteries that have been revealed in this video are par none the highest ode to the reality of what is actually occurring. Now you may understand the Diddy parties and the Epstein Islands and all of the other bizarre things and happenings that are taking place. Wake up, open your eyes, as they are. It is also important to understand that these elite that practice these things are highly initiated at the highest levels. The perversions took place at the highest levels, and therefore you must not underestimate the reality of what is occurring. These people are very high IQ and SQ and look down upon you as inferior beasts. Those who claim to be involved with any of these matters here on the internet are grifters and fools that involve themselves in things they do not fully comprehend or understand. Discord rejects and Skype group rejects that gather up and in secret discuss their bizarre fantasies and other degenerate activities with perversions in the Kabbalah, such as the foolish Nazarene Mamzer, Ein, the great blind buffoon, and other fools that mock around and play dress-up Frankist and Sabbatean, while they themselves in truth are garbing themselves in complete degeneracy, garbing themselves in permissibility of pedophilia, taking upon themselves acts of degradation. These charlatans exist here on the internet, unfortunately, but the true elites, the real Frankists and Sabbatians, they exist and do not find themselves in Discord groups or worthless Skype groups, but are very real. Shalom Selah. Shalom, everybody. This is a part 3 to the true religion of evil. It is recommended that you have seen both parts 1 and 2 of this series before watching this video. This video is in the form of an interview. In the past 2 videos, many of the mysteries that were revealed and expounded upon came from this book here called Moach Gan Eden, The Brain of the Garden of Eden by the Chief Magician of Mystery, Babylon. And in this video, I was able to obtain time to interview him and ask him questions regarding the Frankist and Sabbatian ideology and practices. To say the very least, the entire cosmological structure was eventually revealed by the end of the interview. That being said, it is of a very mature nature and therefore is certainly not fitting for everybody. It deals with many profound, deep concepts and that are taboo and definitely heretical. This being said, this interview was arranged as an assemblage of questions mainly derived from various comments in between the last 2 videos, as well as a few questions of my own in order to help flesh and bring out what the actual ideology is here. Therefore, in this video, as I'm interviewing, I take a very backseat approach and allow him to explain the concepts and theological understandings from the Frankist perspective. And instead of trying to interject or correct or disagree with any of the things that are being said, many of which are shocking to say the very least, I took an approach to allow him to simply expound and explain for you, the viewers, to be able to understand their ideology, their way of thinking from the perspective of a Frankist. So with that being said, it is encouraged to watch this interview all the way till the very end. At the very end of this interview, there is an explosive revelation that reveals the actual cosmological structure and purpose of the Frankists. So without further ado, let us begin. Of the Breach, and I have with me again the Chief Magician of Mystery Babylon. He's the author of Moach Gan Aidin and many other Sephers. So I'd like to just kind of give him the platform to speak on a lot of the matters. And so with that being said, I'll let you go ahead and take the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Y.I.R.A., for that. And so I also have to say that I was very surprised that Y.I.R.A. Revealed what he revealed in the past two videos, right? He's revealing Frankist mysteries, of the highest order. And, I guess I could say that, me and Y.I.R.A. are a bit at odds. Y.I.R.A., he's very passionate, very excited about the holy mysteries, as I am. But I think what the difference between me and Y.I.R.A. is that Y.I.R.A. wants to you want to shout out the mysteries from the rooftop, from the rooftops. I've taken a different approach recently where I'm much more of a concealed private person, and I'm all about concealing the mysteries now rather than revealing them. So I was really surprised how much Y.I.R.A. revealed. And so that's why we're doing this, this third part is we're trying to provide some more explanation and clarity, on these very profound sublime revelations that Y.I.R.A. has revealed in the last two videos. And, one thing I want to mention is, that it's understood in Gnosticism as well as in Frankism, the very clear antinomian essence and nature of the Mashiach. And we see this very clearly in the New Testament and the Gospels. And, I would say that, Orthodox Christians in general don't have a full holistic understanding of the antinomian essence and nature of the Mashiach. And this is a very, very deep, very, very secret, occult, concealed, very sublime subject. And it would take way too long to fully get into, and it's not something I want to fully get into in this video, although I do have a few videos on my channel that do dive a bit deep into this matter. But what is important to understand is that there is this very powerful antinomian nature to the Mashiach and to his Torah. And that's where that ties in to the mysteries that Y.I.R.A. revealed in the previous two clips, where we see this very profound antinomian essence and nature of the higher universes. And we understand that the Mashiach, right, he is rooted in the highest universes, right, which are completely antinomian with respect to our construct. And that's why his law is antinomian. And that's why he himself is antinomian, because at some point it's going to be his duty to bring down the higher universes into this construct. Okay. And, and so that ties into the perversion of what we see with a lot of elite, occult orders. Now, I'm not going to say, I don't want people to think that a lot of these very profane, evil occultists are so highly initiated that they understand what Y.I.R.A.H has revealed in the past 2 videos, because the reality of the situation is that the vast majority of profane occultists, as evil as they are, at the end of the day, the vast majority are very stupid and ignorant and uninitiated, and I can guarantee you that they have no understanding of the mysteries that we revealed in the last 2 videos, right? That understanding would be reserved for like the 0.0001% of the Luciferian elite, okay? We're talking a handful of people here, okay? I can count them on my fingers, okay? So Jakob Frank has this very powerful, great teaching where when he's discoursing on the antinomian nature of the Mashiach and his law, he reprimands a number of his disciples and other people who got ahead of themselves and started to become very antinomian, right? And so you can, in a way, see this as a lot of these occultists are getting ahead of themselves. We're not at a dispensation where the Mashiach has come and his antinomian Torah is in place. We're not at that dispensation yet. It has not come, right? The Mashiach ben David has not arrived yet. And so people are getting ahead of themselves. And that's what Jakob Frank in one of his great teachings talks about. They're getting ahead of themselves. And he says, you're very stupid. He reprimands these people who do this as being very stupid and very ignorant. You don't get ahead of yourselves. We're not there yet, right? This is what we see with the transgenderism movement right now. Why are so many people becoming transgender, right? Well, when you understand the nature and essence of the highest universes, right, you understand that all of the entities in the spiritual realms and the higher universes are mostly transgender. They're bisexual. And so when this is understood, right, there's a superiority. The higher spiritual entities and gods are superior to us, right? And one of the features of their superiority is that they are bisexual. To be bisexual and transgender is superior to just being one gender, right? Plato talks about this, in one of his books, right? And it's understood by very high level. This is an understanding by the highest level of occultists who have very advanced spiritual knowledge. They understand this and they know this, right? And so, of course, it would be great if we could be transgender, right? But the transgenderism that we are seeing right now is artificial. It's completely artificial. It is not natural. It is not organic, right? And that's why it's very inferior, evil, and wrong, okay? But people, we're all spiritual, right? All of us, every single person has a spirit. So this movement of transgenderism is just a tapping into the subconscious spiritual nature of ourselves, understanding. I mean, clearly transgender people, they don't know this. They don't know about the higher universes and the spiritual essence of the higher universes and the spiritual essence of the highest gods. They have no understanding of this. And yet we see them, we see that they have this push to become transgender, not fully understanding why they want to be transgender, right? And so it's like this subconscious spiritual push that we're seeing, so to speak, right? But it's not proper. It's not correct, right? And the issue is, right, the reason that we cannot get ahead of ourselves, right, in bringing down the highest universes to our construct is because the Klippa is a very powerful force that exists in our construct. Our entire construct is completely enveloped in the Klipoth and the Klippa. This is one of the highest mysteries that I've revealed throughout my teachings, and I think Y.I.R.A.H has recently revealed. And so because of the Klippa, we can't do this, right? So let's talk about, pedophilia, for example, right? Incest pedophilia, right? A father wants to have sex with his daughter, right? We know that this type of stuff goes on in the higher constructs, but it's not literal, right? When we say these, when the Lurianic Kabbalah is expounding on these very divine, sublime processes that are occurring in the higher universes, right? It's not a one-to-one. It's not a one-to-one. I just lost the word I'm trying to look for. It's not a one-to-one correspondence. Okay, we understand these processes parabolically, because the spiritual higher universes are very, very different than our construct. We cannot understand them literally. That is complete foolishness and stupidity. Okay, but to go with the example, if a father is an attempt to replicate what's going on in the higher universe and wants to have sex with his daughter, right? You can't do that because of the klippa, right? If you do that, the daughter is going to come out very severely damaged. You're going to damage the daughter extensively, okay, with multiple personality disorder, satanic ritual abuse, all that stuff. It's very abusive. It's extremely damaging to do that to the daughter. Why? Why is the daughter, why is it that if the father has sex with his daughter, the daughter then becomes so ridiculously physically and spiritually and emotionally damaged? It's because of the klippa. The intermediary is the klippa. The klippa is what prevents prevents a father being able to have sex with his daughter in a completely holy, natural way, as it would say happen in the higher universe. It's because of the klippa. The klippa still exists, right? And so these occultists that are engaging in these very evil acts, right? They're not successful. They're not successful because of the klippa. They do not have the power to break the klippa. They don't have the power to break the klippa. Okay. And the proof is that a lot of occultists, right, they want to do these evil acts, right? But how many of them are willing to have sex with their mother or to have homosexual sex with their father? They're not. They won't do that. Why won't they do that? Because of the klippa. Sure, they'll want to have sex with their daughter. They'll want to be homosexual and commit all these evil acts, but have sex with their mother, have sex with their father, with their aunt. They won't. They're repelled from doing that because of the klippa. That's the proof that the klippa exists and it prevents them from going all out. It's because of the klippa, right? But now let's talk about the Mashiach. The Mashiach is a divine figure. If the Mashiach wants to commit an antinomian act, he can break the klippa. He has the power to break the klippa. Understand this. The Mashiach can be antinomian. He has the power to be completely antinomian as he desires because he has the power to break the klippa. But we humans do not have the power to break the klippa. I cannot have sex with my daughter because I can't break the klippa. Because of the klippa, I will be doing great evil to my daughter if I do that. So this is what needs to be understood. But I'll take it back to you, Yirah, if there's anything you want to add.
The purported acts of Jakob Frank and Chabtai Tzvi. I know that the incident with Tzvi and the Arab child, a lot of people have a lot of questions as to what the nature of that was. There was a small clip that was played in part 2, but that story has also appeared in a couple of other places. There's been some other major YouTube channels that have talked about it, and you're talking about the antinomian nature of the Mashiach. Could you possibly?
So let me talk about that. So first of all, there's a lot of, among the highest Shabbatains and Frankists, there's a bit of a division on that matter because some believe that this did not occur, and some believe that it did occur. And actually, this matter is one of the highest and greatest secrets that's very concealed. A lot of people don't like to talk about it because it's a very, very deals with very, very lofty, sublime mysteries that most people, don't have the requisite SQ or the spiritual quotient and IQ to fully understand. And it can be, revealing these mysteries can be very, very dangerous, right? As we've already stated, right? Just look at all the profane occultists who perverted these mysteries by starting to engage. Like, let's say I reveal these. Let's say the revelations that Y.I.R.A.H has revealed in the last 2 videos. Let's say that they are taught and revealed to some very profane, occultists, right? You can see how they, in their stupidity and their ignorance, they could pervert these mysteries and teachings and start engaging in very profane, evil acts to try to mirror the upper universes, right? That constitutes a very great perversion of these mysteries, right? And so that's why it's very, very dangerous. That's why these mysteries have been concealed for thousands of years, because they're very dangerous to reveal, right? And so if we talk about, Shabbatai Tzvi having, homosexual relations with a young boy, well, actually, like I said, this is one of the highest, greatest mysteries. It actually ties to some of the highest secret mysteries dealing with Yeshu or Jesus, that are not very well known. But I'll go back to the example that I gave, right, to understand this. So to understand this, right, I said, what is preventing us or me? Let's say I have a daughter. What's preventing me from having sex with my daughter, right? As I stated earlier, there's a klippa, right? I don't have the power. I'm not divine enough. None of us are fully divine to the level of the Mashiach, where we can break the klippa to properly have sex with our daughter. Because of the klippa, I can't have sex with my daughter, because if I do, I'm gonna irreparably damage her in so many ways. Okay, you can go out there and you can see there's lots of testimonials of women who were raped, and who were raped and had sex with their fathers, and there's a lot of testimonials that you can go on YouTube or whatever, and they'll tell you just you can see just how irreparably damaged they are, just how much damage has been done to them because of these horrific, horrible, evil acts, right? And why? It's because of the klippa. Because of the klippa. Now, let's say I'm the Mashiach, right? If I'm the Mashiach, I have the power to break that klippa. So then, if I have the power to break the klippa and I have sex, if I'm the Mashiach and I have sex with a young boy, because I have the power to break the klippa, I can have sex with a young boy. We can both enjoy it, and the young boy will be perfectly well, perfectly good. No damage, no evil has been done to him, because the Mashiach has the power to break the klippa. This is why the Mashiach can engage in any antinomian. He's God in the flesh. The Mashiach, you have to understand, the Mashiach is God in the flesh. God can do anything. You read the Torah where the Israelites are asking, they were stupid, like, can God build a table in the wilderness? God can do anything. He's God. If God comes in the flesh, if he wants to have sex with a young boy, he can do it. And the young boy will be perfectly fine and perfectly okay, because he has the power to break the klippa. But again, these are very sublime esoteric matters that I'm afraid most of you listening don't have the full SQ and IQ to fully comprehend.
So to help draw out the understanding. So essentially, what you're saying is that what was being described is that the Mashiach has the ability to nullify the klippa, and so then therefore the act between Shabtai and the Arab boy was actually a tikkun. That's what he was insinuating, and what you're expounding here is that because the Mashiach is capable of engaging in these antinomian activities without the klippa being attached to it, what Shabtai Tzvi was doing with the Arab boy was a tikkun, because
so what happens is, because he has the power to break the klippa, that act can then serve as a tikkun. So now he has the power to actually do tikkunim, which have to do with breaking the klipoth. So that act, if the Mashiach decides to have homosexual sex with a young boy, right, he can do it because he can break the klippa, and then because of that, it can then become a very powerful tikkun that manifests, in this construct,
And so you explained earlier that the klippa is the force that's preventing these types of antinomian type of activities that are occurring. And so you're saying that the Mashiach actually breaks the klippa by being able to engage in these types of tikkuns without the klippa being able to harm or cause the damages that you were explaining for, if a layman were to have engaged in those types of antinomian activities.
Correct. He can break the klippa, right? It's the klippa. The klippa is what causes all of the evil and damage, that happens when a prohibited evil act takes place, or an antinomian act takes place, right? And the Mashiach has the power to break the klipoth. He's divine. He's God in the flesh, so he can supersede. He can transcend all the laws of the construct. He can bend, transcend, and break all the laws of the construct because he's God in the flesh. God can do anything, right? You have to understand this,
So there's two points. So the incident that talking about Yeshu, you're referring to the incidents when he gets arrested from the garden, and there's a boy that runs off naked with a cloth, correct?
Correct. So there are the highest, most initiated Gnostics, right, will teach that Yeshu engaged in homosexual activity, and he could do so because he's the Mashiach. He's God in the flesh. He can break the klippa. Now, your average Christian who is exceedingly beyond ignorant on the highest mysteries will consider what I've just said and these teachings to be complete, utter heresy of the highest order, right? and that's understandable,
I see. Okay, and so the incident, and the aspect that was being taught there in the clip regarding the connection between these two, because that clip actually opens up in reference to Yeshu performing this antinomian act, and then talks about Sheptai Tzvi performing the antinomian act, and he mentions that he takes male and female upon himself. Could you expound that type of the magical operation, or the maybe I shouldn't say it's a magical operation, but perhaps the theurgic process of what that is entailing?
So, right, we say that the Mashiachim are bisexual because they're divine beings, right? So, right, it was taught in secret circles, right, that Shabbatai Tzvi was secretly a woman, right? That's one of the most famous teachings. Among the highest Shabbatains, it was known and it was taught that Shabbatai Tzvi was a woman. He was secretly a woman, but everyone saw him as a man. But again, it alludes to the bisexual nature of divinity, because in the spirit realm, as I said earlier, and I have a video, right? I have a recent video that I just published on some of the advanced spiritual technology that we are seeing emerge before us, right now with quantum computing and AI. And I explain, right, in the video, right, that in the higher constructs, right, the entities, the gods, are bisexual in nature. The Mashiach, being one of the highest gods, is bisexual in nature. This is what we see with Yeshu, right? If you look at ancient drawings of Yeshu, you will see him portrayed as a woman. You will see him have feminine features on his face. He has long hair. Why did the ancients portray Yeshu as with very soft feminine features, like a woman? Because it comes from the ancient Christian Gnostics, who knew that Yeshu was secretly a woman, that the Mashiach is really, because at the highest level, one of the highest and greatest of all arcana, the highest and greatest arcanum, and I'm not too comfortable revealing it here, is that the Mashiach in all truth is a woman, not a man. This is one of the highest arcanums. And I don't want to fully expand upon it here, but that's what we're dealing with here. So does that answer your question, Yira? Or did that answer your question, or do I need to speak more on the matter?
I think it laid definitely a platform to better understand the thought processes and the things that are actually occurring. If you'd like to expound more on the matter, I'm pretty sure most people's mouths are probably on the floor, jaw dropped. Feel free to certainly expound any other points, and there are definitely some other questions that I certainly love to hear your opinion on. And
the verse that is cited to what I said in regards to the highest arcanum, right, is in Proverbs. I think it's chapter 3, verse 18. I could be wrong, but in Proverbs it states, "She is the tree of life." Now, if you ask any religious person, especially any Christian, who is the tree of life, they'll tell you it's the Mashiach. It's Jesus. But no, the tree of life, yes, the tree of life is the Mashiach. But in Proverbs, it doesn't say he is the tree of life. It says she is the tree of life. Understand, consider this very, very wisely. But go ahead, continue here. What's your next question?
So Shabtai Tzvi was engaging in separate tikkuns. Did Jacob Frank also perform these types of tikkuns, or was his mission separate or different, or how is it?
Because Jacob Frank is a Gilgul of Yeshu and the Mashiach ben Yosef, he absolutely engaged in the same tikkunim and processes that Shabbatai Tzvi and Yeshu were involved in. Absolutely. And you get hints of this, right? When you read the words of Jacob Frank, there's hints of him engaging in some very strong antinomian sexual acts. Again, he can do so because he's the Mashiach and he can break the klippa. Now, to go back to what you said earlier on Yeshu being the woman, so in ancient Gnostic, in the ancient Gnostic system, right, when you read that the Roman spear pierced Yeshu, Kabbalistically, the Roman spear represents the phallus, which then designates Yeshu as the pudendum. And again, in very ancient Christian art, you see lots of images where Yeshu is portrayed as a pudendum. You literally see these occult occult images of the pudendum, of the female pudendum, where he's literally being equated, with the pudendum. And again, it all goes back to the ancient Gnostics and very esoteric, mysteries, so to speak.
So you're referencing the Vesica Pisces, how many of the portrayals, the iconography, the icons, and the ancient times, they portrayed Yeshu within, basically inside of the Vesica Pisces, which
Correct. Yep, spot on. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, very interesting. And the Vesica Pisces, interestingly enough, I've heard, is also a symbol of the Jesus fish, as well, which could possibly hint to this idea. Okay, so the follow. So you're saying, so now that we've established that for sure the Mashiach were engaged in these types of activities, and you've explained why they were engaged in these types of activities. These activities were not permissible for their followers, or was there like an inner circle and an outer circle? How exactly did that?
Yeah, so it's a very, you're right, you're getting at very, very subtle, very complex questions, right? So let's talk about Shabbatinism, right? There was a big debate and schism between Nathan of Gaza and Shabbatai Zvi, right? Because Shabbatai Zvi was very antinomian, right? He converted to Islam for the purposes of tikkun. He's descended into the Klipot, right? We have to, in the Lurianic Kabbalah is very clear that the function and purpose of the Mashiach Ben Yosef is to descend into the Klipoth. He has to descend into the Klipoth for the purposes of tikkun. So somebody has to go into Islam, which is an entirely Klipothic religion, to redeem it and to repair it. Somebody has to do the dirty work. And who's a divine figure that's going to do all this dirty work to rectify and fix all that's wrong with this world? It's the Mashiach Ben Yosef. And so one of the highest purposes of the Shabbatai Zvi was to descend into the Klippa of Ishmael for the purposes of tikkun. And so there's a lot of, when you're going to descend, you have to understand that if you're going to descend into the Klipoth like Yeshu did, like we see with Yosef in Egypt, or with Yaakov Frank, Shabbatai Zvi, when you're going to descend into the Klipoth to do tikkun, you have to understand there's going to be a lot of antinomian activity that's going to have to take place here. There's no getting around it. It's a function of reality that to descend into the Klipoth to do tikkun is going to involve a lot of antinomian activity. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Okay. Chaim Vital goes very deep on this matter in a few places in his writings, and so there was a debate. Nathan of Gaza being close to a grandmaster, he understood the purpose and mission of Shabbatai Zvi, that it was very antinomian in nature, but there was a schism because Nathan of Gaza was like, okay, I understand, that Shabbatai Zvi, who's the Mashiach, is doing all this antinomian stuff, but how does that relate to me and all of us Jews? Like, are we to also do it? Because there was a schism, because you had all of the disciples of Shabbatai Zvi were replicating the antinomian activity that Shabbatai Zvi was doing. And Nathan of Gaza has to ask the question, is this right? Can we also engage in this? Can we do this too? Is it okay for Jews to go and convert to Islam and start engaging in this antinomian activity that the Mashiach is doing? And Nathan of Gaza was very conservative. He was extremely conservative, and he took the approach that, no, it's not okay. I'm not going to break the Torah. I'm going to be a holy Jew, and I'm not going to violate the Torah, and I'm going to stick to it. Right? And so in that respect, Nathan of Gaza was very ignorant and uninitiated, and he didn't have a full holistic understanding of what was going on. Why is the Mashiach doing this? You have to have a full understanding, like, what is going on here? You're dealing with the highest of mysteries here. And so it's understandable that Nathan of Gaza didn't have a full understanding. But you have to understand, to what I said earlier, the Mashiach is God in the flesh. He has power. Now, if the Mashiach wants to give some of his power to someone else, can he do it? You would have to be stupid to say no. He's God in the flesh. He can do what he wants. If the Mashiach has 10 disciples and he wants to give them some of his power to them so they can start doing some of the things he's doing, he can do that. You see it in the New Testament with the disciples of Yeshu. All of a sudden, you see the disciples of Yeshu start doing all these crazy miracles like Yeshu. How did this happen? Because Yeshu gave some of his power to them. And so, yes, the Mashiach can give his power to you if he so chooses to, so you can become close to the level of the Mashiach and start being at his level. So if you want to engage in antinomian activities to his level, you can start doing that because you now have the power the Mashiach has. So do you understand what I'm saying, Yirah?
Yes. So this was happening with Svi, and I would imagine, and so then the same thing would happen with Jakob Franken, and so their disciples you were explaining earlier spread out and formed in Europe and infiltrated some of these inner organizations. I would imagine you would be talking about, Freemasonry and other types of organizations that were around at the time. But correct?
Correct.
Okay, and so and you mentioned that the Golden Dawn was founded by a disciple of Jakob Frank, and that makes a lot of sense because McGregor Mathers used a copy of von Rosenroth's commentary from Latin regarding the Idras, the Zohar. So
that's a very powerful connection there, right? Because you knew that there's a connection there. That's one of many proofs of the connection, right? Because the what's his name, von Rosenroth, the guy who translated the Idroth into Latin, he was a disciple and student of a Shabbatain grandmaster in Turkey. So that's one of the tentacles. So you can see when you get to the highest level, the highest mysteries, you can see the tentacles of how, you can see the Frankist and Shabbatain tentacles all over, the Eastern European secret orders,
So, and in the video, it talked about the nature of the homunculus. The OTO kind of developed this practice. I talked a little bit about Aleister Crowley, the OTO, and this. I played 2 clips in there where they were talking about the inception of these types of entities. And to give a little bit of preface, just real quickly before you take the time here, it was stated that Aleister Crowley essentially had written a book called Liber 333, and in the book there's 2 sections called the Star Ruby and Star Sapphire ritual, which is the 25th and 36th ritual, and they were the mystery of 5 and 6. And these 2 rituals, or in this Liber 333, this book of lies, was the reason why the OTO initially had contacted him, got a hold of him, and apparently had initiated him. And the name of the country right now is slipping my mind, but there's a specific country that was in existence at the time. It's no longer in existence. It was represented by a double-headed eagle. And this is apparently where their center of operation was. And so they made contact with him, and they initiated him into this secret order, which is Ordo Templi Orientis. And they explained to him the Star Ruby and Star Sapphire ritual because he had apparently inadvertently revealed one of their highest arcanum, and this had to deal with this kind of ritual ceremonial impregnation of spiritual entities. So, like, perhaps they were trying to manifest an incarnation of Ashmedai, so on and so forth. And so they were doing these types of practices, and of course then that came from there. And the understanding that I've understood regarding the matter is that these teachings as well were developed or somehow rooted into the Frankist and Sabbatian teachings some way. So I would that was a major part of the second video. So I would love to hear your opinion.
The highest levels of Frankism and Gnosticism have the complete full understanding of what these secret evil rituals are trying to accomplish and what's really going on, which no one has the full understanding. So I'm going to reveal it here for the first time. I probably shouldn't be revealing it because it's very secret, esoteric, but I've already in this video that we're doing here, I've already revealed some of the highest secrets that have never been revealed. They've never been fully revealed like they have here in this video ever. And other than in some of my writings, honestly, I don't even feel fully comfortable with a lot that I've revealed in this video. It's ridiculously crazy, off the charts, sublime. But I'm going to go ahead and reveal this mystery for the first time here. So what this mystery really is getting at is, if you are a very high level initiate and adept, and you've been properly initiated into the ancient mysteries of Gnosticism, voracious Gnosticism, right? You understand that in the most primordial of, we can't even speak of time. So when I say the most primordial, we're outside of time here because we're in the spirit realm. When we talk about Sophia and the great sin of Sophia, right? Sophia sinned, and I'm not going to get fully into the matter, but I'll tell you what happened as a result of Sophia's sin. Because of Sophia's sin, she became pregnant and she gave birth to a golem. Okay? So the god of this construct, who people call Lucifer or the devil, is really Yaldabaoth. The ancient Gnostics called him Yaldabaoth or Samael. It's he has many names. He goes by many names: Lucifer, the devil, Samael, Yaldabaoth. It's all the same figure. Okay. And Sophia gave birth to him, and he was a golem. That's what he was. He was a golem. Okay. And it was a sin. So we're talking about a clophathic process, a clophathic act that gave birth to a golem, who is Yaldabaoth or Samael. Okay. So these evil people, the highest, most elite Luciferians, what they're trying to do, in essence, is replicate that sin, replicate that process, which is evil. What Sophia did was evil. She sinned, committed an evil act, sinned, and gave birth to a golem, an evil, monstrous entity. Now we have all these stupid, retarded, evil, elite, evil Luciferians. Who, by the way, they understand. There's only a handful of people that I can count on my fingers that know these mysteries that I'm revealing here. Okay, they're trying to replicate this act in creating the golem. Okay, and we read about this in the Book of Revelation, because in the Book of Revelation, it talks about that the image of the beast is going to come forth on this planet. And that's the creation of the golem. They're going to succeed. We're close to the point, or we're already at the point where they've already created the golem. And in our generation, this golem is going to come on the scene. He's going to be the image of the beast that the whole world's going to be commanded to worship. Everyone has to take the mark of the beast, which is coming very soon in our generation. The technology is already here. They already have it. Okay? It's a matter of time before they implement it. So that's what's going on here. That's the mystery. That's the real mystery. I've just revealed it for the first time here.
So that is a very profound correlation between what was going on with these types of impregnations and the concept of Sophia and the Yaldabaoth. That's very, very profound.
And there's a lot more mysteries behind this, and they're revealed in some of my recent Hebrew Aramaic publications. I'm not going to fully. It's a mystery of the highest order that it goes ridiculously crazy, profound, deep. The divine well here runs crazy deep, and I cannot reveal all these mysteries. I've just revealed some breadcrumbs and just the tip of the iceberg, what I've revealed here. So please understand this.
So we'll move on from that particular subject, and thank you for expounding on that. So you mentioned earlier that the inner circle of the Spadians and the Frankists, they received this bestowal from the Mashiach, and they were able to also participate in the antinomian activities. And so if I'm to understand exactly what you're saying properly, they were engaging in these antinomian activities because they were assisting with the tikkun via the breaking of the klipa, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and so how I would love to hear your opinion on how that correlates here into what we see currently today. We see, there's a lot of debauchery and things that are propagated, and we know that this inner order had infiltrated all these different secret societies, so on and so forth. Could you perhaps show or expound a lineage of how they got here to this day? I've also heard that the Hasidim were formed in part by a lot of these teachings. I'd love to hear your opinions on that.
Yeah, so before I get to that, so we have to understand the great arcanum as it's presented in the Lyrianic text, that the klipa precedes the fruit, right? So in this last generation, we're seeing all of this debauchery, right? We can see all the debauchery that's going on, and that's the klipa, right? Because there's two levels to what's happening, right? When the Mashiach ben David comes back and the higher universes come down into this construct, right? And everything becomes permitted, everything's going to be okay, right? But right now it's not okay. And that's the klippa. All this debauchery is not okay. That's the klippa, which precedes the fruit, which is going to come very soon when the Mashiach comes back, and then everything will be okay. And then everything will be permitted and everything will be okay. I'm talking about how Hasiduth has its roots in Shabbatainism and Frankism is a very, very deep and wide subject. I will divert all the listeners to my blog. I have a number of blog posts that dive very deep into this matter. In fact, I will announce here that I plan to do a video with one of my senior chief disciples in Israel. I'm hoping to release the video in the next week or so, where he's going to go through all of the proofs and seals, showing very clearly how Hasiduth is rooted in Shabbatainism and Frankism. And I'm very excited about doing this video with him here in the next few days. So I would just advise all of you to come to my channel in the next week or so and hopefully watch that video, which I'm very excited about. And that will answer that question.
Okay, for sure. Yeah, I know you've done a couple of videos on, you mentioned how Rav Nachman of Breslov quotes the Turkey Prince, which is found in the words of Jakob Frank, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I have a whole hour and a half video that I did recently with all of the proofs and seals that Rab Nachman of Breslov was a full-blown Frankist Shabbatain. And I have other videos that I've done on the matter on that, and I have some blog posts, I think. So that's a very extensive matter that I have dived really balls deep into, showing and proving. And it's not just me. There's other scholars. One of the most famous scholars in Israel wrote a book or a paper on it. A lot of the proofs I just cited from his paper, So it's well known among a lot of elite circles that, yeah, Rab Nachman of Breslov was definitely a Frankish Shabbatain. It's the secret's out. You had to be really stupid or ignorant to not know this,
So this is very interesting. So, okay, so and I do want to hear your opinion on this. So you mentioned that Yaakov Frank is Mashiach ben Yosef, and that there's a connection between Shabtai Zvi and Asmodeus or Ashmedai. Would you care to expound on any of these connections?
Well, yeah. So you have essentially revealed the crazy arcanum. So I reveal in my treatise on Frankism that Shabbatai Zvi he's a Gilgul or incarnation of Ashmedai. That no one fully understands who Ashmedai is, right? Everyone thinks that Ashmedai is an evil demon. Well, actually, he's a Jewish demon. If you read the Zohar in the very esoteric Kabbalistic text, they will explicitly tell you that Ashmedai is a Jewish demon. He's not an evil demon. And Jakob Frank is, because he was the Mashiach, he was the only person that knew these mysteries, and so he reveals in his writings that Ashmedai is a very holy Jewish demon. He's so holy, in fact, that he worships Yeshu. He knows who Yeshu is, and he worships him, and he seeks to be like Yeshu. And that's why he incarnated into Shabbatai Zvi, okay? And there's a lot of mysteries. I've said enough. I don't really want to say anymore, but I think I've said enough, so.
There's a very interesting section in the Talmud that describes the interactions between Shlomo Melech and Ashmedai, and over there they mentioned that basically Ashmedai goes up to the heavenly yeshivot and studies there, and then he goes into the worldly yeshivot down here, and he's found in all of these different yeshivas. And also they mention how he basically didn't want to partake of being intoxicated by drinking, so he would not drink. So they had to trick him into basically becoming intoxicated, by which they removed him from a tree, which I would imagine is a metaphor for the supernal tree.
You can see already in the Talmud, a very holy, powerful text. You can already see many hints. They're already giving you a lot of hints, like wink, wink, hint, hint. This is not an evil demon. Hello, right? I mean, most people don't know how to properly read the Talmud. When they read the Talmud, a lot of the secrets goes way over their heads, and that's just reality. I'm very impressed, Yirah. It's impressive that you were able to catch and see all that as usual. So,
thank you. Well, going to today, in terms of our modern times. So essentially, what's happening here in the reality, if I'm to understand this correctly, is that these these teachings, either directly or indirectly, I would imagine they first started off and were transmitted in very secret societies, and then, from, if I understand what you were saying, they fell into the hands of people that were not in the inner circle or not at those initiated levels, and they began to participate in these types of practices without being qualified to do so, I would imagine. And then this got propagated into trying to make this world like the other world before its time, if I'm understanding all this correctly. And so the debauchery and things that we see in reality is essentially a push to try and force this to occur before its time.
Yeah, correct. I mean, it's not that people know these mysteries. They don't know what's going on. But nevertheless, even though the vast majority of people are clueless, ignorant, and have no idea what's going on, because humanity is essentially spiritual in nature, we all have spirits, where the spirit realm exists around us. And so through our spiritual nature, there's just this organic, natural push that wants to push us to, you know, where we should be, the highest universe. A lot of spirits, right, come from the highest universes. A lot of spirits, when you read the Luriana Kabbalah, the Zohar talks about how the neshamoth, the nefashot, the spirits, they fell into the klipa. But what's the origin and root of all the neshamoth that fell into the klipa? Their root is in holiness, in the higher universes, right? And so a lot of these human beings, a lot of us have spirits from the highest universes. So we have this natural, organic inclination to return to our original abode, the highest universes, right? And that's why there's this natural inclination, organic push to push us into what we term as debauchery, but what in the higher universes is not really debauchery. You see what I'm saying, Yira?
So you're saying, so basically what you're saying is that the higher souls that are here in the reality naturally have an inclination to move towards these antinomian types of behavior because they're rooted in the higher worlds, and inside of the higher worlds there are all of these types of zivugim between the partsufim, and so they're by natural order trying to reflect the root of where they had initially fallen from here. Yes?
Exactly. Spot on. Exactly. Spot on, Yira. Spot on. We have a natural inclination to reflect and project where we originally came from, but unfortunately, we're not able to because of the demiurge, right? The demiurge, in his great jealousy, has appropriated and projected a klipa and klipoth over this construct to prevent us from reaching the natural state that we originally came from. Do you see what I'm saying?
So that's a very explosive connection there. So what you're saying is that Y.I.R.A.H, the demiurge essentially, which was birthed when the sparks fell, you're saying that they fell down here, and Y.I.R.A.H created a klippa because he was jealous of being outside of the upper world where all of these types of activities are permitted. He was not a part of that, and therefore created a klippa to prevent the sparks that descended here from both returning or engaging in those original activities out of jealousy. Is that correct?
Correct. Absolutely. Spot on.
So that's explosive. So you're saying, so basically what you're saying, and this brings about a lot deeper understanding as to what you were talking about earlier regarding the klippa being the thing that prevents people from participating in these activities, that this klipothic force that prevents people from being in these activities was actually created by Y.I.R.A.H out of jealousy to prevent these sparks from returning and performing a type of
He does not want this construct to mirror the upper universes. And that's why he's imposed his klipoth over it. And that's why you get in trouble. So if you engage in homosexual activity, you're fucked. You're gonna have to stand before he's the god of this construct. You have to pass through him. And so you have to be careful with what you do. You have to be very careful. Because at the end of the day, he's the judge and he's the god, and you're gonna have to pass through him. And so if you're stupid enough to engage in homosexual activity, which is prohibited, you're going to be fucked when you stand before him. It's not going to be pretty. You're going to go straight down to hell. Do not pass go. Do not enter the higher universes, okay? So you got to be very wise. You have to consider all this extraordinarily wisely, to say the least.
So to summarize the theological understanding of the Frankists, at the highest level, they believe that all of the Partsufim are essentially in a orgy style of essentially what would be amounted to a celestial eternal sex, and that this sexual union occurs in between mother and son, and father and son, and mother and daughter, and father and daughter, etc., 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 and that this is explained through the various Partsufim. Now, all of these celestial orgies of sorts seem to have been occurring in the highest universe before Sophia gave birth to Y.I.R.A.H. And this is where the Gnostic understanding comes into play. It's important to understand that Frank also converted over to Catholicism, and so therefore there's a fusion of sorts in terms of the esoteric understanding. Now, to further flesh out the ideas, after Sophia gave birth to Y.I.R.A.H., sparks of this highest world fell down into the lowest world. And so these happen to be embodied in certain individuals, and that these individuals, which are essentially the chosen ones, have a natural inclination to these antinomian activities and to have these types of sexual interactions, so on and so forth, because it's a reflection of the highest world. And they explained that the reason why people are not able to have these types of sexual unions, an example between father and daughter, or son and father, or uncle, or however, is because the klipa prevents us from doing so. So the force that prevents a person from wanting to do such a type of activity is the klipa that prevents them from doing it. And their understanding is that because Y.I.R.A.H. was not able to participate in these celestial orgies that were occurring in this higher universe, he formed the klipa to prevent those sparks of Sophia here in this reality from partaking in any of these types of activities. And so the Mashiachin, according to their understanding, are manifested in order to break the klipa. They break this klipa by performing this activity. So, for example, Shabtai V having sex with this Arab boy, as an example. And so the reason why they say that it was a tikkun is because this is morally inherently wrong. But their understanding is that what makes it morally inherently wrong is the klipa. And that this klipa, or this force that prevents a person from desiring to do this, was created by the demiurge, who was jealous of the celestial orgies that were happening in the highest universe that he did not partake in. So he created the klipa, or forces that prevent people down here from desiring to partake in these types of activities. Therefore, the Mashiachin were engaging with these types of activities, having sex with children, apparently, having sex with, doing homosexual activities and so on and so forth, and having sex with family members, something that we see amongst the elite a lot. They were doing all of these activities as a way of breaking the klipa. So their theological understanding of breaking the klipa is that this refers to the person actually performing the activity, and through the action of performing the activity, they thus break the klipot around it, meaning the force that prevents a person from desiring to do such a thing. And they believe that the Mashiachin are God in the flesh, and that they have the ability to do this, and that this actually brings about a type of correction. They also believe that just as God is in the flesh under their understanding, that he can bestow this power to perform these types of antinomian activities to his disciples. And so essentially their disciples are also able to have sex with children and each other, and perform all types of antinomian activities, because in their theological worldview, they are breaking the klipa by by doing things that are against the force that prevents them, because the force that prevents them from wanting to do this thing is the klippa. That's their understanding. And so this is also to a culmination of a messianic age. They believe that the future messianic age is when all of these things will be released and people will be permitted to do everything, because under their understanding, the klippa will be removed, and thus the force that prevents people from wanting to participate in these types of activities, having sex with your dad and so on and so forth, will be lifted. And so in their worldview, this is the Tikkun Olam, this is the messianic age, the messianic redemption essentially will usher in to these types of realities, and a world where people can have sex with their parents and with their cousins and their family, and there's no ill behind it. So it's incredibly explosive, very deep, very rooted in Jewish Kabbalah and Gnosticism. Incredibly dangerous understandings here. So this video is probably without question the most esoteric deep dive into the cosmological understanding behind Frankism that has probably ever been done on this channel, and certainly on the internet. Shalom everybody, this is the last video that I do on this matter. I recently published a video warning people about accusations that were made against the chief magician of Mystery Babylon. These accusations were made after a startling interview that was done with him where he expounded these Frankist ideologies and teachings. I won't name the person who made the accusation to protect that person and the other people that were involved. However, the accusations included grooming and essential pedophilia, etc. Now, in the video, I provided a couple of screenshots that were from a yeshiva in which he was in, some type of Skype group, where sexually charged conversations were occurring with minors, and many people didn't see that as actual evidence. However, I will share a glimpse in this video of the actual evidence of him engaging in these types of things. I cannot, again, share all of it because YouTube will take this video down. And the point of this video, before I reveal these things, is not to slander this person, it's not to defame this person, and not to encourage you, the viewer, to engage in any type of vigilante justice. These things are best left to the authority, and this evidence has been passed on to the authorities. I'm sure there's an active investigation into these matters right now, and it's not our place to enact any type of vigilante justice. With those things being said, it is important that this video only be seen as a warning. And if there are more victims, please do not reach out to me. Reach out to the respective authorities and inform them as to what is occurring. So with that being said, here's a glimpse of some of the evidence. So this first screenshot that was sent to me was his contact on WhatsApp, as this event occurred on WhatsApp, so I've censored the number. So this first screenshot takes place February 19th, February 20th. I would imagine it was February 21st when it occurred. He tries calling him for a few days. It says, "I tried calling you, you don't want to be initiated." He responds, "I don't know how I feel about this. I'm not comfortable talking on the phone. I'm only 13. He says, "Don't worry, when I was in high school, guys used to hit on me." He responds, "You said the Messiah was a girl. What did you mean by that?" He says, "Both male and female, and this is a super sublime level." So we see he's talking with a 13-year-old. So he continues, "To truly be initiated, you have to be both." Child responds, "What do you mean I don't feel comfortable?" And he says, That's the point. You have to break the klippah to truly become initiated. This is what I was saying. Don't you want to be initiated? The child responds, I guess, what do I do? He says, I need you to touch yourself and treat it like you're a girl, and you will be at the highest level like the Mashiach. And he says, are you sure? I don't feel comfortable. He says, yes, you need to do it in order to be initiated at the highest levels. Don't you remember how antinomian he is? You're not supposed to feel comfortable. That's the point. The child responds, okay, I'm touching myself. And he says, good. It continues, I'm going to call and I'll tell you what to do. By the looks of it, there's a 6-minute phone call between the two. The child says, okay, I finished. I don't feel right. He says, congratulations, you are now really initiated into the highest, most sublime mysteries. That's how it's supposed to be, and next time you're going to do it again and again until you break the klippah. Then you will be at the highest levels. Don't worry, I touch myself when you do. The child responds, I'm going to go to bed now. I have school tomorrow. A glimpse of the initial screenshots.
Let's say I'm the Mashiach, right? If I'm the Mashiach, I have the power to break that klippah. So then, if I have the power to break the klippah and I have sex, if I'm the Mashiach and I have sex with a young boy, because I have the power to break the klippah, I can have sex with a young boy. We can both enjoy it, and the young boy will be perfectly well, perfectly good. No damage, no evil has been done to him, because the Mashiach has the power to break the klippah. This is why the Mashiach can engage in any antinomian. He's God in the flesh. The Mashiach, you have to understand, Mashiach is God in the flesh. God can do anything. You read the Torah where the Israelites are asking, they were stupid, like, can God build a table in the wilderness? God can do anything. He's God. If God comes in the flesh, if he wants to have sex with a young boy, he can do it. And the young boy will be perfectly fine and perfectly okay, because he has the power to break the klippah. But again, these are very sublime esoteric matters that I'm afraid.
So as you can see, based off of the screenshots and the accusations that were made, it appears there was horrific grooming behavior and encouragement of a young child and abuse of a young child in which he was participating in. And again, there's much worse, but all of these things have been given over to the authorities. I've encouraged the people that were involved to also go to the authorities. Again, if there were any other abuse victims by this person, please go to the authorities. Do not come to me, go to the authorities. The purpose of this video, again, is not to encourage any vigilante behavior or to go harass this person or anything like that, but to warn you. My fear is that people may become radicalized by these teachings and they themselves potentially engage in this type of behavior, and to warn people about these grooming methods and how this information and how these types of events actually potentially are occurring through these debauched teachings. So please, everybody, stay safe out there. If you see something, say something. Leave it to the authorities. Don't get involved. This is my last video touching any of this. Please, please, please. Be cautious and be warned. Shalom and Selah. Shalom, everyone. This is our part 2 of our series on Samael, the god of religion. In this particular video, we're going to be addressing the nature of the philosophical aspects regarding Western esotericism and their roots within Samael. As a precursor for the nature of this video, it is highly encouraged for you to watch the playlist on this channel entitled The True Religion of Evil. There is a deep dive on the nature of the Sabbatean Frankist teachings, their inversion and perversions regarding the teachings of the Kabbalah, and their advocacy for all types of degenerate acts, including many things that I cannot say here. After having viewed that playlist, return and watch this video for the furtherance of the nature of the Western esoteric occult system. Let us begin. So to begin, we have the structure of the Sefirot, and we've discussed the roots mainly of the lower seven. We've discussed the secret of Christianity in Gevurah. We have briefly touched upon Islam in Chesed, and the Klippa of Judaism within the Sfiros of Tiferet, being Yaakov. The Klippa of the New Age in Western occult systems is to be found in the Sfiros of Yisod. To fully understand the nature of these matters, you must understand that Yisod is the reproductive organ. And so, these Western occult traditions have at their foundation and basis secrets behind the reproductive organ. A brief history traces the roots of the Golden Dawn being influenced by various other secret societies that ultimately have their lineage to the Frankist movement in Jakob Frank. Many people are aware that Jakob Frank converted into Catholicism, and then later, as a Christian, he died. One important keynote is that it is widely regarded that he was one of the founding members of the Bavarian Order of the Illuminati, which infiltrated Freemasonry and infiltrated the Jesuit order. It was founded by Adam Weishaupt. Jakob Frank was one of those founders. Now, purportedly, the Illuminati, this is the Bavarian Order of the Illuminati, was the outer order, while the more inner order, which were the Frankist sects, remained on the inside. The outer order was made for the Gentiles, or the Goyim, the non-Jews, and they carried on a lot of the traditions of the Frankist ideology. Purportedly regarding the nature of building up what is called reshimu. Reshimu is a type of residue or filth or dross that builds up, if you can imagine, tarnish on silver. And they had a concept that from the reshimu, the New Age would come into being. That is because our Zohar tells us that the serpent was birthed from the reshimu. And it was stated that the Mashiach could come only in one of two ways. Either the world was completely good, or the world was completely evil. And because we can't all be good, then let us all be sinners. Let us all be evil. Well, the nature of creating that evil and the nature of creating a world that would be enveloped by this type of evil did not merely suffice with the Sabbatian movement regarding the inversion of the mitzvah and the transgressions, the intentional transgressions that were occurring in regards to the minor aspects, in which they inverted every mitzvah inside of the holy writings. And so therefore, if it said, do not commit adultery, it meant commit adultery. If it said, do not lay with your sister or your mother, it now meant to do that. And nonetheless, they began to practice ritualistic orgies, drinking of blood, human sacrifice, etc., much of which the broader public is beginning to become aware of regarding a lot of the things that are currently going on, at least having some root within the nature of these things. Regardless of which, it came to an understanding in which they could no longer simply just build up the reshimu through the ritualistic practices of the initiates within themselves, performing all of these bizarre acts and transgressive acts in order to build up this reshimu on the soul, or the kli, the kalim of the nukva, or the earth. And therefore, they set out to actually subdue the world and build up reshimu as a total, as a totality. Of course, if the average person was aware of the nature of this, they would not be involved. And so then, therefore, an initiative was set forth, one that the Bavarian Order of the Illuminati was actually accused of being involved with, and that is, of course, fixing a war. They were accused of fixing a war, in particular, the Battle of Waterloo, which would then cause Adam Weishaupt to go into exile. Adam Weishaupt was the partner of Eve Frank. Eve Frank was the daughter of Jacob Frank, and they were an archetypal Adam and Eve. Nonetheless, the entire purpose of the Bavarian Order of the Illuminati was to express these new messianic teachings regarding Jacob Frank and spread them through the lenses of liberalism. Nonetheless, they were accused of fixing this Battle of Waterloo because although one side or another side, and if people were aware of the nature of the transgressions, they would not willingly participate inside of it, they created wars, and they funded the wars from all sides, destabilizing the world and causing immense suffering, tremendous suffering. Once they began the immense suffering of the planet, they then began to build up the regimu upon the clay of the earth. However, there was also a religious perspective. That is to say, there was Catholicism and Christianity and Islam and Judaism. And so they set forth to begin to subvert these ideologies. And they did this through the lenses of liberalism. And so they began to subvert the ideals of Christianity and Catholicism. They began to subvert the ideals of Islam. They did that via the Sufis after Shabtai Tzvi's conversion and through the system of the Dunme, which were founded in Turkey. Nonetheless, they would continue, and they began to subvert Judaism in all of its aspects as well. Therefore, the point of Adam Weishaupt was to infiltrate Freemasonry, in which he was a Freemason. George Washington attests to the nature of the Illuminati corrupting the orders of Freemasonry over there in England. And this is actually mentioned in our National Archive. There's a handwritten letter by George Washington detailing this aspect. Furthermore, he also became a Jesuit. A Jesuit is the Freemasons for Catholics, essentially. It's a secret order in which he then began to propagate and spread the ideals of what they were calling an enlightenment, a liberal enlightenment, amongst those orders which began to corrupt and pervert those things. Nonetheless, the roots and origins of all of these different matters and their infiltrations led to massive perversions that would come later in the later Western occult traditions that would find themselves labeled as self-professed Rosicrucian orders, ultimately into the nature of the Golden Dawn, and definitely within Ordo Templi Orientis, or the OTO, as it's more formally understood, in which these ideas found place and were developed into a more philosophical system by which most of the Western esoteric occult tradition actually stems from. Now, as for the letter by George Washington, I'll show to you it here. Here is a link to the manuscript material. We got it from loc.gov. And here is a picture of the original letter, and it's dated September 25th, as we can see up there from Mount Vernon, 1798. And you can see right here where the cursor is, Doctrines of the Illuminati. And this is what he has to say regarding the matter. He says, I heard much of the nefarious and dangerous plan and doctrines of the Illuminati, but never saw the book until you were pleased to send it to me. The same causes which have prevented my acknowledging the receipt of your letter have prevented my reading the book. Hitherto, namely, the multiplicity of matters which pressed upon me before, and the deliberated state in which I was left after. A severe fever had been removed, and which allows me to add little more now. Then thanks for your kind wishes and favorable sentiments, except to correct an error that you have run into of my presiding over the English lodges in this country regarding Freemasonry. The fact is, I preside over none, nor have I been in one more than once or twice within the last 30 years. I believe, notwithstanding, that none of the lodges in this country are contaminated with the principles ascribed to the Society of the Illuminati. Now again, I cannot emphasize the importance of you viewing and watching the playlist I have on this channel entitled The True Religion of Evil, in which there's a deep dive behind the Kabbalah and the ideology, including an interview regarding Frankism and the understanding that is a prerequisite to contextualize specifically what George Washington was referencing regarding the contamination and corruption. Now, one of the major important inversions that were brought about is in the aspect of the spheres of Yesod. The spheres of Yesod plays a major role in all of the Frankist teachings because it deals primarily with the reproductive organ. And therefore, you will find that the corruption and perversion and the subversion of all of these different religious practices have to deal with Yesod, an example, the reproductive organ. A prime example of this is the perversion within Christianity of the Christ oil, which is said to be some type of oil secretion produced at the roof of the mouth and from the brain as it descends from the 33 sections of the spine, which they interpret to be the 33 years of Jesus, into the creation of a type of christened oil from the reproductive organ, namely by not ejaculating and so on and so forth, and building up the energy, which they then ascribe to different things like prana and energy from different oriental systems that were used as a justification for the reasoning behind these types of corruptions. Nonetheless, in order to subvert the religions, they needed to remove the ideas of God, and they replaced the system that originally were in the holy aspects of the Kabbalah and the various places in which they're to be found, and they subverted it by creating things centralized around sexual corruption and perversion. Again, semen retention is basically the esoteric Christian doctrine, the creating of the Christos oil. This then was popularized, of course, amongst the elite, so on and so forth, and then spread into the public masses and as a package designed to sound esoteric and sound occultic even, but in reality was an entire psyop to subvert the Christian doctrine. Now, regarding the nature of the OTO and so on and so forth, which arguably is the premise for most of what we call Western esotericism, especially those quote-unquote chaos magicians, which were birthed from Crowleyan theology and ideology. As many people know, he was a member of the Golden Dawn, but then he would eventually enter into an initiation of the OTO. And the report is that he published a book called Liber 333 called The Book of Lies. And essentially everything in the book was purported to be a lie except for the 25th and ritual and the 36th ritual. The 25th ritual was 5 by 5 and the 36th ritual was 6 by 6. They were called, and I'll mention them here, they are called the Star Ruby and Star Sapphire rituals. Now, the Star Ruby and Star Sapphire rituals are rituals that involve a micro and macrocosmic process by which a person eventually essentially obtains semen and a process of ritualistic impregnation. Now, they would do this in order to create a type of homunculi, which was one of the main endeavors of their pursuits. And they did this in a variety of different ways. To summarize some of the more bizarre practices of the OTO, for example, and the Golden Dawn as a whole, they have something called the cake of life. The cake of life has essentially semen baked into a cake, and then it is ritualistically placed with menstrual blood by the high priestess of their respective order, and then they consumed it as a type of mock communion, usually associated with a mock Gnostic mass. Nonetheless, they do this religiously. And so, regarding the Star Ruby and Star Sapphire rituals, when he published Liber 333, he was contacted, presumably, by a secret society that was operating, or an extension thereof, Prussia, in which he was initiated into the Ordo Templi Orientis, the OTO, the Templars of the Orient, in which he was then revealed the nature of the Star Ruby and Star Sapphire ritual, and then placed as the head of that order, in which they then began to implement these things on a broader scale, incorporating or influencing and infusing these perverted ideologies into the general occult systems, and ultimately into the masses through various publications, so on and so forth. It is also known that Aleister Crowley had intelligence agency ties in the midst of this, because these things go to the very top. I'm not going to make mention of the other founding members of the Bavarian Order of the Illuminati, but do your due diligence and research. Nonetheless, returning to the subject at hand, they focalize their system around the creation of the homunculus, as I said, which is all dealing with the reproductive organ. The aspect of the cake of life is from the seminal emission. The aspect of the menstrual blood is also from that which comes from the reproductive organ, being the left and right columns, as many of you viewers know here. The aspect of the Star Ruby and Star Sapphire ritual is to create a homunculus. One of their goals and agendas in the creation of these different things, aside from their ritualistic sex, was to impregnate entities inside of the priestess or the woman. And so they believed that by doing specific ritualistic sex acts and invoking specific shadim or demons or so on and so forth, they could actually infuse and give birth to that entity. Meaning that through ritualistic sex and evocation and ceremonial magical operations, that they could actually give a kalim, or clear a vessel, to the entity, an example here, a shadim or a demon, and impregnate that demon inside of a woman so that she could actually give birth to that. There is a massive amount of information and an example of this found by one of Crowley's disciples, who later was involved with the jet propulsion systems regarding NASA. You should go do your research on that matter. And the impregnation or attempted impregnation of the entity called Babylon. Nonetheless, these types of rituals were developed and spread, including rituals of defilement. Aleister Crowley was known for collecting various STDs. He collected these STDs because he believed that they were actual demons, and that by taking the demons upon himself, for example, the STDs, he could utilize their powers in ritualistic practices. He also encouraged different aspects of defilement, and he went through rituals of defilement where he basically exhausted himself in every possible way, doing things that are absolutely insane, from the consumption of blood and feces, as sacrifices, bizarre sodomy, everything you can possibly think of under the sun. And all of this was in an attempt, of course, to go apart that process of which I had mentioned in the beginning, the process of the Zohar. It's important to note that Western esotericism, essentially as a whole, was heavily influenced by these matters. And most of what is publicly available in terms of the occult and so on and so forth, especially regarding that of whatever it is that we call the New Age, is rooted in that, including that aspect of chaos magic, which would later develop based off of the Crowleyan theology, which was influenced by the OTO, which had been influenced by the various secret societies that were influenced ultimately by the Frankist movement, and carried a lot of those traditions and agendas into the modern times. And I'd like to play for you a bizarre clip of a person actually talking about some of these things regarding these chaos magicians.
Does your mother's bush contain an ancient consciousness? Could it be that your mother's vagina contains within it residual atomic and subatomic particles from the hundreds of men who have penetrated her? Could it be that each of these subatomic particles is their own planet, and on that planet there are civilizations living right now in your mother's incredibly hairy, lumpy puss? many chaos magicians think this could be the case, which is why it is very important, if you really are interested in changing your life, and why wouldn't you be, to make sure that you scrape your mother's vibrator. Put it in a jar, put it in a petri dish, jerk off into it over the next full moon, and unleash within you the hidden ancient power forces that the federal government does not want you to recognize that you have. According to many chaos magicians, there are active agents within the federal government who do not want human beings to know this one simple trick to absolute freedom and liberation.
So now, why is all of this happening? So from a Kabbalistic perspective, it is said that the world exists for 7,000 years, and it's alluded to in the very first verse of the Torah for the 6 alephs that are mentioned. Aleph, for those of you that don't know, can be read as Aleph Lamed Fe, which means 1,000. And so there's a concept of 7,000 years in Kabbalah. So when we calculate the years, we go through the various Sefirot, and we find ourselves into the entry point of Yesod, which is at the year of 6,000, as mentioned in another place. The important thing to know about this aspect is that as we enter in or emanate from the light of Yesod, from the Atik, essentially, in short, reality is emanating through the various grades of the Atik. It's currently and still occurring and processing. Reality is not completed in its emanatory process. We enter into the spheres of Yesod. As we enter into the spheres of Yesod, this reality, the world, becomes hypersexualized. In addition to this, it also becomes confused, because Yesod is the portion in which the right column, which is the male, and the left column, which is the female, become intermingled. And so during this generation, there is a massive amount of gender confusion, and there's also a massive amount of gender fluidity. The reason why all of this is occurring from a Kabbalistic perspective is because as the lights of Yesod are emanating, so too are the influences of the reproductive organ. Because it's all intermingled together, this particular generation is a generation where everything is kind of all over the place. That means that you'll find all of these activities happening in the same environment, where you'll have mosques and you'll have synagogues, and you'll also have churches. And this is because of the intermingling nature of Yesod that receives the Shefa, or the flow, from the 3 columns. To understand the capitalization behind the theological components of the Frankists and so on and so forth, they understood this nature exactly of what I'm describing. And so they capitalize on this, and they utilize the energy that would be emanating within the 6,000th year. Now, for those of you that are talking about the 6,000 years, and you may ask me, well, what does that mean? If you look at the Jewish calendar, we're, in the year 5,700 and some change, we're moving very closely to the 6,000th year, where the lights start to emanate from. They knew about this far ahead of time. And regarding Yaakov Frank, there's a couple of things that I would like to posit and make mention of him. In the book Hasidic Tales, it states the following. In the story of the false Messiah, Rav Israel struggles to overthrow this false Mashiach, who is identified here as the Messiah of Satan. And this is what it reads. When Satan heard Rabbi Israel beg for Mashiach to descend upon the earth, Satan, the enemy, laughed and said, I will send down Messiah. Light has one great eye, but darkness has 1,000 arms. Light is one and master of eternity, but Satan is legion, and reigns from each instant to each instant. And now Satan has reached forth one of his 1,000 arms and brought down the false Messiah, whose cursed name was Jacob Frank. Now, I could go into many different other things, but for the sake of time, I will resolve it here. Consider very carefully the things that I've said about the nature of the perversions, the nature of the Western esoteric tradition, and essentially how sex magic is the root of all of these different organizations and where the origin of corruption regarding these matters came from through the inversion of what has already been mentioned. Although they themselves would like to claim that their lineage and origin comes from the Hindu systems regarding Tantra, so on and so forth, this simply is a farce and is not the case. It is only an adaptation, a smokescreen, in order to justify their perversion and their corrupted practices and teachings. Anyone that is looking into the nature of Western esotericism should refrain from doing so. Even though the last video described Christianity and the nature of Samael being the center of this, the esoteric aspects of it void out even whatever little morality could be received from that, transforming Jesus into the nature of semen retention. In the same manner with Western esoteric traditions and regarding the occult of the New Age, be very cautious regarding all of these things, because they are soul-destroying, and they are designed to be soul-destroying in order to posit that reshimu, to posit that tarnish from suffering and evil that comes about when a person's soul suffers. So, as David HaMelech said, open my eyes and behold the wonders of your Torah. Amen, everyone. Shalom and Salah.